Chapter 112. They all have extraordinary charm towards the opposite sex, and they all fell into serious emotional disputes. Moreover, it seems that they all went missing when they ran away from home. This, looking at the biographical information of his ancestors, Luo Ye's head was full of question marks. He couldn't help but think of a certain plot where one who wants to wear a crown must bear its weight. According to the records, Vincent Akot and Roy Akot were both heroes of their time. Not to mention how they looked, in short, they were very popular with women. It wasn't difficult to understand that they were strong in the present age and came from a noble family. However, the strange thing was that the women they provoked were also very fierce. Female generals of the empire, great scholars of Bologna, all of them were super fierce people. The facts proved that the same process could easily lead to the same result. Whether it was Vincent or Roy, they seemed to have been forced by the women. In addition, their fiancés were also not to be trifled with. Their own strength and family influence were very strong, causing the family to be very disharmonious. Sigh, they are really too unrestrained. Why did they provoke so many women, and they are all so abnormally strong? Aren't they pushing themselves to their deaths? Luo Ye put down the records and sighed with a regretful look. Then, he suddenly thought of himself. Wait, this is related to my situation, it doesn't look like it at all. The black-haired young man laughed heartlessly. Noah Iyer was his protector and naturally wouldn't hurt him. Ai Lizzie wasn't interested in supernatural powers and wasn't strong. Most importantly, Luo Ye patted his chest and fully felt the progress and beauty of the era. Those who could arrange a marriage with the Akot family were definitely not small nobles. They were likely to be big forces. Generally speaking, if one wanted to deny it, they would have to pay a huge price and the influence would be very bad. It was really troublesome. However, this kind of bad habit in his era ended with his father who loved freely. Sigh, let's not talk about it anymore. Father is awesome. Luo Ye revealed a bright smile. He still didn't know the fact that his father pulled his grandfather down. However, this wasn't important in his eyes at the moment. His real goal hadn't been achieved yet. Messing around and being a scumbag can increase one's strength? Could it be to be the Sea King? It can't be, right? If it's true, then he deserves to die. Luo Ye shook his head. No matter what, he didn't think that the crown would be activated in such a way. He had no choice but to look at the part he didn't want to look at the most. History and the exploration of ruins. In addition to their messy relationship, Vincent and Roy were also adventurous. Both of them were great archaeologists, and there was no doubt that this was very suspicious. However, the records had been destroyed, so Luo Ye could not find too much detail. He was helpless about this, but being in the holy capital gave him other means. Even if the Akot family didn't have any records of these two, it didn't mean that other places didn't have records of these two. The black-haired boy closed the book and looked at Anna, who was standing quietly at the side. Prepare the car. We're going to the Royal Library. In an exquisite and elegant small space, the black-haired boy raised his teacup and took a sip of tea. He looked at the ancient book in his hand, and his heart was filled with emotion. The Royal Library of the Holy Capital was one of the most magnificent buildings in the Holy Capital of Lorraine. It had been built for 100 years, and although it was not as magnificent as the St. Pharaoh's Cathedral, it had the unique elegance of a scholar. Overall, it had a strong scholarly atmosphere, and a lot of effort had been put into the decoration. The reason why the Royal Library was called the Royal Library was naturally because the Heathcliff family had paid for it. It was obvious that the royal family had invested a lot in this library, but fortunately, the investment had paid off. The Royal Library of the Holy Capital was now one of the 3 great libraries in Shia. It had been famous for 100 years since it was built, and its name had spread throughout the world. The Holy Capital Royal Library of the Theocracy of St. Maester, the Millennium Glory Library of the Austin Empire, and the National Wisdom Library of the Kingdom of Scholars, Bologna, were the 3 most famous libraries in the Shia world. These three libraries together held 60% of the ancient records of mankind, and could be said to be the symbol of the Shia civilization. The Royal Library of the Theocracy was the last of the three great libraries to be built. In fact, it was founded because of a dispute. The founder of the largest library in the Theocracy was Sanctus Lucas, who was the father of the current Sanctus John. According to the royal family secrets revealed by Nu'a Iyer, he should be the son of Vader and the adopted son of Wei Dualia. Sanctus Lucas was one of the most interesting Sanctus in history. Perhaps he inherited it from his Chinibu father, Vader, or perhaps Wei Dualia spoiled him too much because he felt guilty. In any case, this Sanctus Lucas had an extremely high self-esteem, and he was the kind of person who could not bear the slightest grievance. Normally, it would be fine. The Heathcliff family was so powerful that no one in the Theocracy dared to offend them. However, as the saying went, no one could escape the beating of society, not even someone as powerful as Sanctus Lucas. The Shia Eastern Border Defense Agreement was an important agreement that all the countries in Shia had to sign every 30 years. The purpose of this agreement was to determine the defensive area and military deployment of each country at the eastern border, to guard against the aliens, and to jointly maintain the peace and development of the human world. As for why it was a 30-year agreement instead of a 100-year agreement, it was mainly because other than a few large countries, some small countries were dying too quickly. Often, the frontline soldiers of a country would not have enough food and pay, and they would simply die. Of course, there was a higher possibility that they would pretend to disband to escape the sanctions of the agreement, and then go back to reassemble and throw themselves into internal wars. This kind of operation basically happened once every decade or so, but the frequency of holding a world conference once every decade or so was too high. After all, transportation in Shia was not convenient. It would take the Sanctus a few months to travel to Austin and back. In addition, negotiations and wrangling would take even longer. Therefore, they simply chose a small country to double the average number of years it would take 30 years. The conference that Sanctus Lucas attended was held in the capital of the Austin Empire, Theo. The process of the conference was rather difficult. There was a lot of wrangling between several large countries. Among them, the Austin Empire and its old rival, the Theocracy, had a conflict, and it was at that time that Lucas was beaten up. Since it was a negotiation between the heads of countries, they naturally could not be locked in a room like a company meeting. Most of their negotiations would only take place once every 10 days or half a month. As for the time outside of the negotiations, they would usually visit each other and build relationships, or visit places of interest or attend banquets under the arrangement of the host. Chapter 113. Luoya had heard a saying in his past life, gaining knowledge is the cheapest way to improve yourself. This saying was quite common in modern society, and it was even more important in Shia, where Luoya was now. Leaving aside the group of fierce people who had obtained the wisdom, origin substance for the time being, in this era where there was a serious shortage of intellectuals, being able to write or write well was a skill and a livelihood. Every large clan had to hire people to collect and organize their histories, so that they wouldn't even know their ancestors' names after a few generations. However, someone like Akkad, who even had records of his ancestors' XP, was definitely an exception. Luoya seriously suspected that he owed the recorder a salary, but now that he was freeloading off the government's records, there shouldn't be anything like that. At Luoya's request, the Royal Library's librarians went out in full force, gathering all the information on Luoya's two ancestors. The information was enough to fill up a table. With such a large amount of information, Luoya naturally couldn't go through it all. He could only look for the important points. After half a day of organizing and summarizing the information, Luoya's conclusion was roughly the same as Ponte's. These two ancestors didn't seem to be people who were content with their lot. During their reigns, they were quite active, and they were also very fond of adventuring and exploring ancient ruins. Luoya thought about it and felt that this was a clue, but it probably wasn't a method of accumulating extraordinary power. After all, no matter how many times they went out in their lives, they spent most of their time at home. According to the records, their strength had increased during this time. And if they couldn't get stronger if they didn't go out, what kind of otaku curse was this? It was a bit nonsensical. Luoya, who liked to stay at home, eat his fill, and sleep well, felt that people should be content with what they had and learn from the mistakes of their predecessors. After all, they had already lost 2 ancestors. Wouldn't it be stupid to follow the same old path? Luoya, who had decided to turn over a new leaf, continued to search through the relevant records, but unexpectedly, the crown origin substance actually reacted. It wasn't obvious, but it was definitely absorbing magic. It slowly increased the rate at which Luoya's body mutated, increasing Luoya's strength bit by bit. Its speed was similar to stepping on the accelerator of a car. When Luoya sensed this feeling, he finally understood why the 2 ancestors were amateur archaeologists who loved history. It turned out that reading historical records was one of the ways to upgrade the crown origin substance. But here, Luoya discovered another problem. It didn't seem like all historical records. For example, the large pile of diaries left behind by Ponte could be considered ancient texts, even now, but when Luoya had flipped through them, he hadn't felt it before. Why? Wasn't to read? Luoya shook his head to get rid of this thought that made him speechless. After thinking about it carefully, he felt that the crown origin substance could only be stimulated by reading something of research value. Or perhaps, from the name of the crown, it could only be useful if it was related to the king's history. Luoya couldn't figure this out in a short time, but he wasn't worried because the Akot family had a lot of records. They were all reliable things that his ancestors had used. If he didn't know which one would be useful, he would just give it a try. After all, there were a lot of them, and they would definitely fill his stomach. Luoya, who had found a way to improve his supernatural power, was very happy. He didn't say anything and immediately began to level up. He carefully read the history of the human countries after they migrated to the west. The more he read, the more he felt that it was quite interesting. In his previous life, Luoya was a liberal arts student. Geography and history were his specialties. He also had a hobby in this area. However, unlike the history of his previous life, the history of the Shia world was somewhat mythical due to the supernatural power. In most people's minds, after the cataclysm at the end of the Second Era, humans migrated to this peaceful land through the westward migration. However, the truth was that this land was not peaceful from the beginning. The natural environment was too primitive, and there were many ferocious monsters that were recorded in the history books. The mutated animals in this world were very ferocious. Luoya knew this when he saw Ka Dia's deer head during the winter hunt. However, although the deer was ferocious, it was nothing compared to the monsters that the first human pioneers encountered when they opened up a new world. In the mythology of the Shia world, the creator god, Shia, was the mother of all intelligent races. These races did not include animals in the natural world. After all, they did not have self-consciousness. If they did, the entire Shia world would have to be vegetarian. However, although there were no animal races, there were still intelligent creatures in the form of animals. For example, the sacred beasts that obeyed Shia's orders had source substance. Source substance was basically a symbol of whether a creature was intelligent or not. Ordinary animals would not have source substance even if they were mutated. They were barbaric and brainless. They might have the cunning of wild animals, and they might know some basic tactics. However, no matter how strong they were, their thinking was still the same as that of wild animals. Of course, those who chose not to use their minds were indeed beasts, but their combat power was generally very high. The sacred beasts who had source substance were the messengers of wisdom of Shia, who assisted the various races in battle during the mythological era. They followed the various races to open up new worlds. Some of them had quite high status. Those who chose to use their minds instead of their minds were not as ferocious, but they were very intelligent. Although there were no detailed records, legend had it that the ancient Austin Empire had a guardian beast in the Second Era. After the ancient Austin Empire was destroyed, when people came to this new land, they naturally encountered native creatures. Just as the ancient giants and angels had disappeared, the sacred beasts had also disappeared with the passage of time. However, some mutated animals with intelligence that could be roughly tamed still existed. These mutated animals that could be tamed generally had a good impression of humans. Perhaps it was because they had to deal with their own kind for many years. At that time, humans were also very welcoming to them and domesticated them, such as the warhorses of various countries and the eagles used for long-distance communication. However, there were more mutated animals that could not be tamed and communicated with, and they became the nightmare of humans. According to historical records, the human countries at that time were still very weak. When they encountered the super monsters that occupied a piece of fertile land, there was nothing they could do. They often fought the monsters on a country-by-country basis, and there was no guarantee that they would win. How did the 5 noble families of the theocracy come about? They were the 5 most ferocious families who followed Heathcliff to open up new territories and fight monsters. It was not an exaggeration to say that the theocracy was conquered by the royal family. That was why they were the foundation of the theocracy in later years. It took nearly 200 years for humans to get rid of these super stubborn families step by step. In these 200 years, the number of humans and countries that died in the hands of monsters was too many to count. Historians called them the victims of the War of Expansion. Reading up to this point, Luoya felt a lot of emotions. He felt that this should be the story of how humans in this world fought against nature. Humans had many great achievements, but compared to conquering nature, Luoya felt that they were not qualified. Conquering nature itself was a symbol of human civilization, and it was also a kind of spirit. It had existed since the birth of humans. They hoped to be cool in the summer and warm in the winter. These were the most primitive motivations for human progress. Under the great goal of conquering nature, generations of humans sacrificed their lives and painted a colorful and magnificent life. Some of them opened up wastelands for farming, while others set sail. No matter how dull or passionate they were, there was a common belief that shined in their hearts. That was, humans can conquer nature. Wait a minute, so the development of our Akate territory is very low. Reading up to this point, Luoya, who was secretly excited, suddenly remembered the report he read in his home. When the theocracy was first established, the Akate family's territory was very large. They were even the leader of the 5 noble families. However, according to the division of power, the Akate family had never been the leader of the 5 noble families. The main reason was that the Akate family's land was undeveloped. Why was Eric so strong 200 years ago? It was because most of their territories were plains, which were suitable for farming and had a large population. Although their territory was not as large as the Akate families, it was the least difficult to develop among the 5 noble families. As for the other noble families, the Bafas family in the North Sea was fishing, the Lusan family had a large forest area, and the Wester family had many mountains. Chapter 114. In the palace, the gray-haired maid suppressed her excitement and walked towards her master's palace. Today was a day of special significance. It was the day that Mia had been looking forward to, and it was also a day that was a little sad. Today, the palace would hold a grand ceremony for the Nu'a Air princess to fulfill the royal mission and become the protector of the Akate family's heir, Luoya Akate. As the princess' personal servant, Mia would also work extra hard today. Personal servant was a relatively special position. Generally speaking, it would be carefully selected and the requirements were very strict. Especially in the big noble families and the royal family, the heir's personal servant would be strictly checked, and the status of the servant would not be too low. In fact, this was the case for Mia. Although she was the maid who served the Nu'a Air princess, she was also the daughter of a noble family, and her father's title was not low. In the years that she had been in this position, Mia had obtained substantial benefits for her family. Her father's official position was promoted, and the eldest brother in the family was also appreciated by the royal family. However, it had to be said that Mia was further and further away from her family. She came to the palace alone when she was in her teens, which was the most sensitive age. It would be a lie to say that she had not suffered any grievances, but she had no relatives by her side, so she could only hide everything in her heart. It was the same when she went home to chat during the holidays. Her family was more concerned about the royal family than her. Her father told her to work hard and win glory for the family, and her brother also asked if there was a better way. Sometimes, Mia felt that she was not so much a member of the family as a tool of the family. Her family's feelings for her and her feelings for her family had faded, but human beings yearned for love. Therefore, Mia placed her feelings on the princess who had accompanied her since she was a child. After several years of living together, Mia sometimes even had the illusion that she was Noah Ayer's elder sister. Of course, she knew that it was just a delusion. Noah Ayer's status was not something she could compare to. But even so, she could not help but want to take care of her. Hence, Mia made her move. A while ago, Mia had used her connections to spread a rumor. It was a story about two children who were in love with each other and ended up being imprisoned. It was an explosive story that perfectly poked at most people's sore spot. Although she didn't mention any names, Mia had released some misleading information. Everyone already knew who the two people in the story were. Miss Maid's purpose was very clear. She wanted to create an established fact and create an environment where everyone was on the same side as her. After all, it was already a miracle for a Noah Ayer to fall in love with someone. Although in the eyes of outsiders, the princess was noble and elegant, benevolent and dignified, Mia, who had been with her for the longest time, could see that she had never really valued any of her subjects. She treated everyone equally. To a certain extent, she had no close friends. This phenomenon was very abnormal in Mia's eyes. People could not live without friends. They could live without friends for a period of time, but not all the time. However, Noah Ayer was an exception. Most of her peers were not easy to communicate with. Her strength was far beyond the imagination of other children. Geniuses were lonely. Noah Ayer, who was already high above others and a genius, was even more lonely. And, although it was a little inappropriate to say this, Mia always felt that Noah Ayer was strange in the past 2 years. She remembered that once when she did something wrong and was supposed to be severely punished, the princess only stepped on her a few times. Noah Ayer was very light. She did not use much strength when stepping on her. She did not feel anything at all. Was this considered a punishment? And why did the princess look so excited after that? Well, the princess must not have the heart to punish me. She just wanted to go through the formalities. Mia thought so and finally found a reasonable reason. Then, she was even more touched. Sob sob, the princess is too good to me. The servant girl thought about this and walked to the bedroom door. She knocked on the door and entered after receiving permission. Your Highness woke up so early today. Well, actually, I can't sleep. Facing Mia's exclamation, the golden-haired girl replied with a bitter smile. Noelle, who was very strict with her body, didn't expect that she would have such a situation where she couldn't sleep well because of some things. You can't sleep. This means that you really value Luoya. Probably. Facing Mia's smiling words, Noah Ayer was silent for a moment. Although she was a little shy, she did not refute. In Miss Angel's eyes, her own feelings weren't something that needed to be concealed to begin with. A ruler's emotions were something that needed to be displayed so that others could cooperate with her. And as the aggressor, she couldn't hide her emotions when facing the men of the Akat family. Wei Dualia's teachings were deeply ingrained in Noah Ayer's heart. No matter if it was Ponte or Luoya, when facing these guys, she had to deal a heavy blow. It would be best if she could win with a single blow. Even if she could not win, she had to at least push the other competitors to the ground to prevent any accidents. Recalling the silver-haired girl beside Luoya, Noah Ayer sighed helplessly. In fact, she was already one step behind when she set off. Ai Lizzie and Luoya met earlier, and their relationship was already formed. If Noah Iyer tried to be the bad guy and ruin things, not only would she fail, she might even cause Luoya to dislike her. Furthermore, with her identity, it would be inappropriate. It would be easy for her to be misunderstood as a member of the royal family trying to sow discord between the members of the major noble families. Naturally, Noah Iyer would not do such a thing. Right now, the only thing that comforted her was that Ai Lizzie was still very naive. She did not directly reveal her feelings for Luoya. She was immersed in the intimacy brought by family, and she was probably afraid that saying such things would ruin their current relationship. Of course, it could also be due to her shyness as a girl. But none of this mattered. As long as she did not attack Noah Iyer, she would have plenty of opportunities. Mia picked up the bell on the table and shook it lightly. The crisp sound came from outside the door. A large group of maids swarmed in a few seconds after the bell rang. They tidied up the room, picked out a dress, and prepared makeup items needed later. Mia arranged for the princess to take a bath. The palace became busy. At the same time, in the labyrinth of the holy capital, Luoya was stunned by Anna's cold gaze and skillful makeup. Chapter 115. The royal palace of Saint Mestre was built 1,000 years ago. When humans first arrived in the West, the holy city of Lorraine was still one of the major hubs of the human race. It was used as a temporary command post. Later, after the founding of the theocracy, it was converted into a royal palace. It was one of the oldest buildings in the country. Being old meant being culturally profound, but physically, it meant being old. However, the royal palace of Saint Mestre had been renovated several times over the past 1,000 years. It had even been rebuilt once due to a great fire. The most recent renovation was a few decades ago. Therefore, it did not look like an ancient building. Instead, it looked very grand. The overall tone of the palace was holy white. According to legend, it was the color of angel feathers that the architects had carefully mixed. Although Luoya did not know where the workers saw the angel feathers, the visual effect was indeed very good. It had a special sense of holiness. The design concept of the palace was also very straightforward. It was simple and elegant. To some extent, this style also reflected the style of the royal family. The Heathcliff family valued holiness as their beauty, so naturally, they did not have any fancy decorations. In the lounge of the palace, Luoya, who had just finished his tour of the palace for the first time, was drinking tea. He was thinking about the entire process of the ceremony over and over in his mind. By the way, is the saint's dagger finally going to be returned to me? The teenager muttered to himself, unconsciously touching the side of his waist. More than half a month ago, when he and Noah Iyer returned, although they were both unconscious, they had established a spell connection through the dagger. Bishop Philip did not dare to act rashly, so he summoned the people of the Holy Ceremonial Court. This group of people specialized in all kinds of ritual spells and could be considered experts in this field. After that, the two were sent to the Vatican for separate treatment. Those who did not know the details of the dagger thought that it belonged to Noah Iyer, so it did not follow Luoya back to Akkad's house. It was said that a blade was a warrior's lover. Although Luoya was not a warrior, he missed his battle partner very much. After all, the Holy One's dagger had saved his life several times in critical moments. Moreover, it was a dagger that had been opened by the Noah Iyer and his blood. It could be considered as a bond between the two of them. Now that it was about to be returned to its rightful owner, he was naturally happy. The main event of today's event started from the ceremony to Luoya receiving the protection of the royal family in front of everyone. After that, it was time for the banquet. There were not as many nobles in attendance as there were during the birthday banquet because most of the nobles in the various territories had gone back home to celebrate the new year. After all, no matter how prosperous the holy capital was, they were still guests. It was not as comfortable as being the master of a territory. However, Luoya felt that this was a good thing. This time, most of the court nobles, military personnel, and knights were his own people. The atmosphere was much better than last time. Lord Luoya, the ceremony is about to begin. Please follow me. Okay. Hearing the servant's reminder, the young man nodded and was led to the entrance of the banquet hall. Stepping on the bright red carpet and looking at the beautifully decorated door, Luoya could not help but smile bitterly. He realized that he had unknowingly arrived at a very powerful place. The St. Cecil Hall was a place that, together with the large square in front of the holy capital's St. Pharaoh Cathedral, were known as the two holy places. Needless to say, the square was a place where the Vatican led people to pray every year. As for the hall in front of him, it was because of its long history and user. The St. Cecil Hall was built at the same time as the Royal Palace. It had a history of nearly 1,000 years. When the theocracy was announced, the 5 great nobles were enfeoffed in this hall. Most of the people who had walked into this hall over the past 1,000 years were heroes of their generation, generals who had made outstanding achievements on the battlefield, ministers who had led the successful reforms, and even Pont, the ancestor who was bestowed the title of Luoya by the Queen of Wei Duolia, was here. I didn't expect that this place would be used. Luoya swallowed his saliva and suddenly felt that something was wrong with this ceremony. At first, Luoya thought that this was just a necessary procedure because of the agreement from 1,000 years ago, just like cutting the ribbon at a construction site, but now the situation was, this was not cutting the ribbon, this was the posture of a National Day parade. Standing on the path of glory of the ancestors, Luoya was a little nervous. The old butler beside him also obviously noticed this, but unlike his usual cold and indifferent attitude towards the nobles, today the old butler of the royal family was like a spring breeze, and his face was smiling like a chrysanthemum flower. Lord Luoya, please don't be nervous. You are the youngest protagonist of the St. Cecil Hall so far. You should be proud. Wang Laoju comforted him cheerfully. As soon as the words left his mouth, not only did Luoya not feel better, but his stomach also started to hurt. He glanced at the old butler and could not help but praise him in his heart. As expected of the butler of the royal family, this way of comforting was taught by Noah, right? Luoya naturally had to make up for it when he realized that he was out of the scope of the exam, and at the same time, he crazily prepared himself mentally. As usual, he walked with balanced breathing first, and put on the Medal of Honor. Other than Noah, there were only cabbages and radishes. He did not even look at them. After making all the preparations, Luoya took a few deep breaths and adjusted himself to the best state. As soon as he finished adjusting, the bell in the butler's hand automatically rang without any wind. After the guards heard it, they prepared to open the door. Lord Luoya, please come in. After the guards greeted him, they slowly opened the 2 arched doors that were several meters high. At the same time, the angel above the door emitted a burst of colorful light, and at the same time, pure white feathers fluttered in the air. Luoya was stunned for a moment. Colorful light? Feathers? What's going on? Am I an SSR in a random card game? The black-haired teenager was surprised by the gorgeous entrance, but he did not know that this was just the beginning. After the spacious door was opened, the bright hall was immediately filled with cheers and applause. The number of people far exceeded Luoya's expectations. Just the number of people on both sides of the carpet was estimated to be more than 100. What the hell? Is this just some nobles from the palace? Recalling the words that Prince Kai-in relayed to Ka-dia, Luoya was dumbfounded. There were at least 1,000 people on both sides of the carpet, right? Chapter 116. When Noah reached out her hand to stop Luoya from kneeling, Luoya was a little confused. Not kneeling in front of the king was normal in this world. After all, the king was only the head of the nobles. He didn't have absolute control over the nobles. However, it was different during the ceremony of receiving a title. It was a tradition to kneel on one knee to express respect. Don't kneel. Upon hearing Noel's words, the young man lifted his head and met the young lady's affectionate gaze. After pondering for a moment, he straightened his body. The moment he straightened his body, the crowd in the hall behind him was in an uproar. What's going on? Why did he stand up? Her Royal Highness asked him to stand up. Really? What's going on? The guests who had never seen such a scene began to discuss and speculate. Some said that it was normal for the ceremony to be different from a title. Some said that it was a change in the rules of the royal family. Some even guessed that it was an impromptu wedding. The audience was shocked, but what they didn't know was that the royal family and the staff were even more shocked. In the first row of the crowd, Prince Cain, who saw Noel's nonsense, couldn't help but turn his head and look at St. John with a frown. Father, isn't it a little inappropriate for Noah Iyer to do this? Inappropriate? What's inappropriate? The gray-haired St. John blinked his eyes when he heard Cain's words, as if he didn't understand what his son was talking about. His Royal Highness looked ahead and said, "It's really disrespectful to change the rules set by the ancestors. The process of the ceremony is messed up." Bishop John was stunned. He looked at his son as if he was looking at an idiot. His face was full of disdain. "Process my ass, your daughter is flirting with a man. Our family is here today to do this. Can't you see it?" I, John, was also proud of Saint Mestre's love saint. How did I give birth to such an idiot? Granddaughters are the best. I finally understand why a prince like you is the one who chose your wife. Why did you suddenly mention this? Cain, who was suddenly attacked by his father, was dumbfounded. John of the Holy See rolled his eyes and ignored him. The old man looked at the Noah Iyer in front of him and made a gesture of support. He also notified the etiquette officer. "Oh right, I remember that the covenant ceremony doesn't require kneeling, right? Let's go with that." The blonde girl in front of him breathed a sigh of relief when she heard Hardadef's order. Luoya looked at the restless crowd in the hall and couldn't help but speak. "So you didn't have a plan?" "Yeah, I just changed my mind at the last minute." Noah Iyer held his sword and smiled. He seemed to be surprised by his own actions. "It's just a kneel. I don't really mind. If you want to kneel, I welcome it when there are only two of us. But forget it in front of outsiders. I don't like people I like kneeling to me." The overly ferocious straight ball hit Luoya's heart, causing the young man's heart to beat wildly. Even his breathing was almost broken. He looked at the Noah Iyer who put down the Holy King's sword according to the etiquette officer's instructions. He couldn't help but have a unique feeling in his heart. "Your Royal Highness, the covenant of equality requires a token. What do you think of the short blade of the Holy King that is to be given to Luoya?" Not bad. Let's use that." Upon hearing the etiquette officer's suggestion, Noah Iyer readily agreed. The short blade of the Holy King could be said to be an opportunity for her and Luoya to get closer. It was bathed in the blood of both of them. From this point of view, it was the most appropriate token. After a burst of noise, the hall quieted down again. Under the gaze of everyone, Noah Iyer stretched out her hand and raised the short blade in the shape of a white feather. She injected her power into it. The next moment, the short blade of the Holy King shone brightly, and a layer of halo shrouded the two of them. The Holy King had a spirit, and naturally, it would protect its master. Now that the two masters were in front of it, the short blade of the Holy King immediately became lively like a child who was reuniting with his parents. Its originally metallic blade became more and more lifelike, and the holy aura continued to spread. For a moment, it made the originally holy St. Cecil Hall look like a heavenly realm. The crowd began to scream and scream. This feeling. St. John and Prince Cain looked at each other. They both felt the holy aura sweep past them, and the bloodline power in their bodies began to stir. This strange feeling was obviously not the standard of a holy king, but in fact, the one who felt this feeling the most was Noel himself. Chapter 117. Ever since she developed feelings for Luoya, Nu'a had been troubled by a problem. Their relationship might be a long-distance relationship. As a princess, Nu'a was usually very busy. Most of her activities were in the holy capital and the Night Order. As the only child of the Akhat family, Luoya also had to stay in his territory. Thus, there was a problem. What if someone burglarized her house when she wasn't there? As the saying goes, those who kill will always be killed. It was the same when it came to stealing. A professional crystal thief, Nu'a, strictly speaking, was the one who stole the Ai Lizi. Learning from her mistakes, she didn't dare to be careless when it came to her turn. Furthermore, Nu'a glanced at Luoya's face under the wings of light. She couldn't help but feel her heart skip a beat. In terms of appearance, Luoya was very attractive. He even had a ridiculously beautiful adopted sister by his side. Furthermore, he didn't have much vigilance. It would be a waste if he didn't take precautions. However, it was easier said than done to take precautions. Even Nu'a didn't have the confidence to generate electricity from a distance. However, she didn't expect that the skill, Afterglow of the Crown, would give her an opportunity. That's right, Nu'a didn't care about the last two skills of this skill. Instead, she had a soft spot for the first skill. Due to the different perspective, the skill that she wanted the most was the one that Luoya didn't care about the least. Under the effect of Afterglow of the Crown, she could casually project an image of Luoya once every 7 days. In addition, she could also visit the Akhat family when she went to the Night Order. At most, they could meet up to 5 times a month. 5 times. This was much better than meeting once every few months. As a princess, Nu'a couldn't casually decide to marry him. At the very least, she had to wait until she reached adulthood. In other words, as long as she could keep an eye on him for a few years. Thinking so, the smile on Miss Angel's face deepened. On the other side, Luoya was still touched. The girl looked at this young man and suddenly felt a little guilty, but more than that, she felt a rising desire. Seriously. This expression of not doubting me at all, was simply like a cute pet, making people want to pamper and bully it. Nua''s face flushed red. Naturally, she couldn't hold Luoya in her arms in front of everyone. She could only try her best to control herself. The noisy environment in the hall covered her heavy breathing, so Luoya didn't notice anything strange. Look at those 2 children, their wings of light. Shia, what's going on? So beautiful. The pure white sparks floated like fireflies, and the 2 angels with their wings of light stood in the center of the sparks. This surreal scene was undoubtedly the first time anyone had ever seen such a scene. Both the nobles and the officials understood one thing. That is, they might have witnessed an incredible scene, perhaps even historic. The crowd was excited and began to guess what had happened. Onlookers never complained about big things, let alone the live broadcast of the royal family's news. Marquis Kadia, who was in the first row of the crowd, looked at the short blade of St. John and almost guessed the reason. However, before he could think of an explanation, St. John suddenly stood up and opened his mouth to speak nonsense. Everyone, this is Shia's blessing. As soon as St. John jumped up and spoke, Kadia was stunned. Marquis Kadia stared with his eyes wide open and found that Luoya was also stunned. In front of everyone's eyes, St. John's face didn't turn red and he didn't pant. His face was as holy as if he had been enlightened by God. He waved his hand and pointed at the 2 children in front of him. This is Shia's gift. The Great Mother Goddess has recognized their oath. They are a pair blessed by Shia. This is fate and God's will. Let us bless these 2 children. May they always maintain their original hearts. Oh! John of the Holy See defined the 2 of them in just a few sentences, and it immediately caused a huge commotion. The devout believers began to kneel down in joy, and the girls who were eager to gossip began to scream. The venue was in an uproar, and everyone's emotions were stirred up. Kadia looked at the scene that was almost out of control. He could only attribute St. John's actions to increase the cohesion of the church. He glanced sideways at the silver-haired girl who hadn't said a word since she came in and just stared at Her Royal Highness. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. If it had been anyone else spouting this nonsense, Katia would have stood up and retorted for Elisa's sake. However, the one who was spouting this nonsense was the king of St. Maester theocracy, John of the Holy See. No one present dared to say anything. Sorry, AI Lizzie, we'll have to bear with it for now. Kadia sighed. He could only make up his mind to help AI Lizzie in the future. As for now, he would just treat it as the darkest night before dawn. After all, the Holy Capital was Her Royal Highness's home ground. But it would be different if they returned to Akat Hill. No matter how powerful Noah Iyer was, could he chase her all the way to her house? Kadia shook his head and laughed. He looked forward. After the ceremony was completed, the sacred music of the Holy See began to play. Chapter 118. In the noisy hall, Luoya was busy farming. However, while he was in high spirits, the silent flames of war had been ignited on the other side. On the other side of the hall, two beautiful girls were silently looking at each other. Neither of them spoke, but the cold atmosphere made the people nearby feel that something was wrong. The noblewomen began to exchange information. There were quite a few people who had seen Elisa at the birthday banquet. Soon, the girl's identity became known to everyone. A group of noblewomen and young ladies began to look at her with fiery eyes. That child is Luoya, Sama's adopted sister. That is to say. Shh. Lower your voice. There is no evidence yet. What evidence do we need? Look at the atmosphere over there. I'm afraid Her Highness is in trouble. The noblewomen and bureaucrats watched the battle excitedly from a distance, as if they were witnessing a duel between two swordsmen at the top of the Forbidden City. On the other side, Katia glanced over and her expression changed. She hurried over to chat with John of the Holy See and the others. AI Lizzie, if you have something to say it quickly. Time is precious. It won't be good if he sees us. Noah Iyer glanced at Luoya, who was still busy on the other side. She looked at AI Lizzie in front of her and felt helpless. AI Lizzie's identity had its own difficulties. It made it difficult for Luoya to perceive the difference between family and love. However, it also had its own unique advantages. For example, if anyone wanted to get close to Luoya, it would be impossible for them to fall out with AI Lizzie. Noah Iyer didn't know if Luoya would be an exception, but she didn't want to try. It wasn't easy for her to get close to Luoya, and she didn't want to complicate things at this time. Miss Angel stared at AI Lizzie's red eyes and felt nervous. She was afraid that this child would make things difficult and make things too ugly. If that happened, it would be troublesome if Luoya noticed. However, it turned out that her worries were unnecessary. Greetings, Your Highness. I don't have any other intentions this time. I'm just here to greet you. It doesn't matter if my elder brother sees me. Is that so? If that's the case, then I welcome it. If our relationship is too stiff, it won't do us any good. Please be at ease. As long as Your Highness is still the power that protects Lord Big Brother, I will not unreasonably criticize you. After all, Lord Big Brother's safety is more important than anything else. I see. Upon hearing AI Lizzie's words, Noah Iyer's expression relaxed a little. She suddenly felt that Luoya's love for her wasn't without reason. This child still knew her priorities. Luoya might seem to be safe now, but there were still many pairs of eyes watching him. For example, the secret silver monastery that wanted to kill him because of his bloodline. There were many strange organizations like this that had a grudge with the Akat family. According to John of the Holy See, most of the awakened bloodline of the Akat family were short-lived. Generations of awakened bloodlines all died young. This curse had undoubtedly become a sore spot for the Noah Iyer. It seems like you value him a lot. Of course, I love Lord Big Brother. I can't tolerate any harm to him. The silver-haired girl covered her chest with her hand as she spoke. The expression on her face instantly melted into a smile. This warm smile was fleeting, but the irresistible charm made everyone's heart skip a beat. Before I can personally protect him, there's nothing wrong with letting you take his place. Take his place? You really dare to say that? Do you think you can surpass me in the future? Wait a minute. The blonde girl's expression changed halfway through her words. Her pair of blue eyes stared deeply at the girl in front of her. Her pupils couldn't help but flash with surprise. This feeling, she was about to reach source level 5. How was this possible? She had seen AI Lizzie at Noah Ayer's birthday party. At that time, she was still an ordinary girl who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. In a short 2 months, she was already about to obtain source form. A chill ran down Noah Ayer's spine and she became vigilant. She narrowed her eyes as she looked at the girl who dared to provoke her. An unprecedented sense of danger rose in her heart. When it comes to protecting Lord Big Brother, of course it's up to whoever is more qualified to do it. Am I right? Your Highness. So that's how it is. I've really been looked down upon. Noah Ayer stepped forward with a smile on her face. Although she didn't release any curse energy, her entire aura suddenly became stronger. Take my place. Hee, if you can do it, then try. I'll let you understand the difference in strength. The two of them looked at each other, the flames in their hearts silently igniting. AI Lizzie had found a target worth surpassing, while Noah Ayer felt the urgency of being chased. The two most talented girls in the theocracy had been stimulated by a single person just like that. As a result, there were 3 sets of flames in the hall. Luo Ayer's side was the most popular. Countless nobles and officials shook his hand and thanked him profusely. Noah Ayer's side was full of fighting spirit. The 2 girls refused to back down under the crowd of women. As for the third, it was Kadia. Chapter 119. Can't go back. Father, what do you mean? Luoya listened to Kadia's words and was stunned for a moment. Obviously, he did not understand the meaning of this sentence. The murderous aura is so strong. Why does it have the smell of, I won't let you out of this door today, after the failure of a gang negotiation? What's the situation? The royal family arranged 300 axemen nearby. It doesn't make sense. Perhaps seeing Luoya's strange expression, the Marquis hurriedly added another sentence. It's work. Something happened in the military, so I probably can't go home with you. That's what I mean. So that's what you mean. Father, can you not scare me? Wait, did you just get the news? Well, Prince Kai-en just informed a few of our senior members of the Knights. After the banquet, the officials of the military will probably have to stay. Kadia sighed and was obviously worried. Luoya heard this and suddenly felt that things were not good. No matter what, it was still during the banquet, and the main character was Noah Ayer at the St. Cecil Hall. Needless to say, it was even bigger than a birthday banquet. What kind of urgent matter needed to be communicated at this kind of banquet? And speaking of the military will have to stay. Luoya looked back at the number of people wearing military uniforms coming and going in the hall. There were at least 100 people. If all of them stayed, it would be too big of a commotion. Father, is it convenient to say what's the matter? Luoya asked Kadia in a low voice. The Marquis hesitated and sighed. Forget it. Anyway, you will know later. Signs of mutants have been found in the security area of Tuck Fortress. What? Mutants? Lower your voice. Before Luoya's words came out, Kadia reached out and covered his mouth. The father and son glanced around and were relieved when they found that no one was paying attention. This is confidential military information. It hasn't been announced yet because of fear of causing panic. Don't talk nonsense. I understand, but, isn't this a little too big? Luo Ye swallowed a mouthful of saliva. His heartbeat sped up when he heard the news. Traces of the mutants. These few words didn't seem like much, but to those who had some military knowledge, it was like a bolt from the blue. The reason was that this wasn't like hunting. Even if you saw the traces of the mutants, you might not necessarily see them. Once you found the traces of the mutants, it was basically a prelude to war. There was a saying at the border that there were only two kinds of mutants. One was that there were none, and the other was that they were everywhere. The Great Migration at the end of the Second Era was no joke. It was a journey that was measured in years. They had to travel such a long distance before they found this paradise. Then, the question was, the mutants had traveled such a long distance to the current human world. Could they be here for a vacation? Since the cost of investment was high, the desire for results was naturally high. It was the same for the mutants. Therefore, every time they discovered traces of these mutants, there was basically no peace. They would definitely try to attack the humans. Counting the years, it had been more than 80 years since the mutants last invaded the West. From a historical perspective, it was not that long ago. Why did they suddenly appear again? Luo Ye, calm down. Although this is a serious matter, it might not be the worst. Ka Dia patted the nervous young man's shoulder and explained the current situation from a professional's point of view. Luo Ye relaxed a little after hearing this. It turned out that there were many such cases in history. The two fortresses in the east of the human world would encounter such situations every few decades. However, most of the time, the mutants who came were not strong enough and were forced to retreat. The famous 4 invasions to the west were actually cases of failed defense. As long as it can be defended, it is not a big deal. The people will not know about it. This should be the case this time. Is that so? That's good. Luo Ye looked at Ka Dia, who was still calm, and let out a sigh of relief. As a family member of a soldier, the possible war was a small-scale defensive battle. This kind of news made him feel a lot more at ease. Well, don't worry too much. Maintain a good mood. You are the main character of this banquet. Ka Dia patted Luo Ye's back and urged him to quickly return. The black-haired young man's face showed a difficult expression. It's too difficult to pretend that I didn't hear about it. After sighing and adjusting for a while, Luo Ye squeezed out a smile on his face. He raised his head and puffed out his chest as he walked towards the Noir. When the princess saw him, she immediately walked a few steps forward. Chapter 120. Luo Ye Akat was very touched. As the saying goes, a daughter is a father's little jacket. Although Luo Ye is not a father and is only a brother, Ai Lizzie is truly heartwarming. Caressing Ai Lizzie, who threw herself into his arms and combing her glowing silver hair with his fingers, Luo Ye's heart gradually calmed down. As for Ai Lizzie Akat felt that her brother was too difficult. Brother Luo Ye, her big brother who grew up alone, had experienced too much. His mother died when he was young, and his father could not be by his side. When he was young, his supernatural power awakened slowly, and he was once judged to have no supernatural talent. It was not easy for them to meet each other and rely on each other for warmth. However, they encountered the rude and unreasonable royal family. From that weird old man to the unreasonable princess, they all wanted to use her elder brother. What a bunch of bad people! Ai Lizzie thought angrily. It was obvious that she had a prejudice against Heathcliff. She felt that her peaceful life with Luo Ye gradually deviated from the path after coming to the holy capital and meeting Noir. And now, Luo Ye, who had experienced so much, had to face the impact of starting a new family. This cruel reality made Ai Lizzie unable to bear it. Woo, why does this world always want to hurt brother Luo Ye? Under Ai Lizzie's unique filter, Luo Ye was already the perfect representative. Any dissatisfaction was persecution and suppression. Thinking so, The girl's eyes welled up with tears, and her little head rubbed against the boy's chest a few times. Big brother, do you think father will listen to our advice and give up? As soon as Ai Lizzie said this, Luoya was stunned. Looking at the girl's crying appearance, his heart ached, and he sighed inwardly. Yes, Elisa's father died on the battlefield. Now that she was finally able to live a peaceful life in the Akot family, she didn't expect that her adoptive father would also have to go to the battlefield. This must have stimulated her psychological shadow. The black-haired boy's expression was conflicted, but he could not give an answer that could make Ai Lizzie feel at ease. It should be very difficult. After all, to a certain extent, it might be his wish. Thinking of Kadia, who was so focused on his career that he even neglected his territory, Luoya could not help but rub his eyebrows. Not to mention his father's dedication to his job, Roha didn't think that Kadia was the kind of person who would cower in the face of a war with the aliens. Soldiers, especially soldiers who defended their country, were mostly unyielding and courageous. Seeing their comrades die on the battlefield, the first reaction of many of them was not to retreat, but to seek revenge. Seeing that the situation at the front was not good, many of them did not panic, but chose to go to the battlefield personally. Asking Kadia to retreat at this time was simply a fool's dream, and it would also damage his reputation. Sometimes, nobles even valued their reputation more than their lives. As a son, Luoya naturally could not do anything that would ruin his father's reputation. But I think it's wrong to completely ignore our children. We should at least listen to your opinion on this matter. Ai Lizzie was still trying her best with tears in her eyes. No matter what, she could not ignore Luoya, who was part of the family when it came to reorganizing the family. Furthermore, Luoya was the only child. If Kadia remarried and had the intention of having a second child, then Luoya's advantage as an only child would disappear. Losing the identity of an only child, Kadia being deceived by a vixen, Luoya losing the right to inherit the family. This long series of plot lines formed in Ai Lizzie's mind in just a few seconds, and it made her even more uneasy. I must not let something like this happen to Big Brother. Ai Lizzie clenched her small fists as she thought so, and her entire person became resolute. Big Brother, if it's not convenient for you to say it, then how about I do it? You do it? Yes, leave it to me to make father change his mind. The silver-haired girl looked resolutely at Luoya's golden eyes. Luoya blinked and could not help but ponder. Wait, if Ai Lizzie were to say it, the effect would be better than if I were to say it? After all, Kadia was her guardian, and he promised to take good care of her. Although it was impossible to make Kadia completely give up on the idea of going to the battlefield, even if he could only retreat to the second line of logistics, it would be much better than going to the eastern border and starving. Thinking of this, Luoya nodded slightly, and his eyes gradually brightened. Ai Lizzie, then I'll leave this matter to you. Don't worry, do it boldly. Whether it succeeds or not, I won't blame you. Yes, I understand. Ai Lizzie clenched her fists, feeling that she had understood the essence of the matter. Luoya's eyes also lit up, and it was obvious that he had high hopes for her. In this situation of mutual trust, the two finished their dinner and began to read in the study while waiting for Kadia to return home. Chapter 121. On the second day after Luoya was granted the position of acting overlord, Kadia left. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses are mobilized, the army's supply line has always been the most important part of military operations. Although the route used to send supplies to the eastern Tark fortress was still there, it was only suitable for the current situation. After the appearance of the mutants, according to the agreement, the various countries would increase the number of troops to defend the area they were in charge of. It was inevitable that the population of the eastern border would skyrocket. Under such circumstances, the daily transportation volume would increase by more than 10 times. Simply put, after a few decades, the human countries needed to build roads again, and this road was quite long. But fortunately, there was a foundation left behind before, so strictly speaking, it was only building roads. This task undoubtedly fell on the head of the logistics department. As the head of the logistics department, Kadia had to personally go to the site to inspect, and was also the first batch of soldiers to leave the army. After waving goodbye to Kadia at the door in the morning, Luoya looked at his father and the soldiers who left with a serious face and sighed. Although Luoya had discussed the issue of the territory with Kadia several times, he had never thought of being an acting overlord. In the end, managing a department and managing all the departments were two completely different concepts, and the many complicated matters were enough to give him a headache. But fortunately, Kadia still had a sense of law. Yesterday, he had drafted a power of attorney and had the palace notarize it overnight. As long as there was this thing, Luoya wouldn't be considered as taking up the post without a certificate. But in the entire theocracy, there weren't many people who dared to investigate him, so this thing was at most icing on the cake. After Kadia left, Luoya and Ai Lizi also began to prepare to return to the territory. Thinking of this, Luoya felt very convinced. It had been almost 3 months since Noah Ayer's birthday party last year, and Akate territory had been idling without anyone, but everything was still as usual. As expected of an ancestor who had thrown his responsibilities to the wind. He had completely turned into a feudal lord. For the entire day, Luoya and Ai Lizi were thinking about what to bring and what to purchase. After all, the Saint capital was the most prosperous place in Saint Mestre and there were some things that couldn't be bought elsewhere. Usually, nobles would greet their friends before leaving and even meet up with them. However, Luoya and Ai Lizi didn't need to do so. At most, they would send someone to inform the palace. Then, before noon, the person who informed them came back. However, he didn't come back on his own. Instead, he came back with a large number of guards and the royal family's carriage. Alright, to a certain extent, Luoya had already guessed that this might be the case, so she wasn't too surprised. Ai Lizi's little face, on the other hand, puffed up. But as a noble, she knew that it was a friendly gesture for her to pay a visit before she left, so she could only pinch her nose and acquiesce to the vixen's arrival. If that's the case, are you leaving tomorrow? In the living room, Noah Ayer looked at the siblings sitting opposite her and sighed. Naturally, she couldn't bear to part with Luoya. However, Ai Lizi was also an interesting person. As a competitor, she felt a sense of crisis. If the conditions allowed, Noah Ayer would like to compete with this child. Losing both her lover and her competitor meant that the life of the princess would once again become dull and dull. To be honest, Noah Ayer wasn't too happy. However, she also knew how important a territory was to a noble, so naturally, she couldn't say anything to dissuade them. Of course, this was because Noah Ayer didn't know about the great achievements of the Akate territory's governance. She didn't know that there was such a big noble family in the world who didn't care about anything. Otherwise, she might have really made them stay for another 2 months. You should already know about the military situation, right? The mutants? Yes, I heard from my father. Uncle Kadia should have already left, right? He left early this morning. I am now the acting lord, so it is reasonable for me to return to the territory as soon as possible. Noah Ayer understood Luoya's answer. However, after glancing at Ai Lizi, Miss Angel decisively stated her request. You can go back, but you have to write to me. Write to me? Yes, I am your protector. It is my duty to understand your situation. Let me think, 1 letter a week. Noah Ayer smiled and said the communication frequency, which immediately caused Ai Lizi to be dissatisfied. Your Highness, not to mention how useful writing letters can be in protecting Brother Luoya, 1 letter a week is too frequent, right? Brother is busy as the acting lord, I don't think it is good to add to his burden. I don't think it is a burden to write to me. In fact, this is the first time I have asked someone to write to me. Luoya, do you hate it? No, I don't mean that. Facing the princess who looked as if her pride was hurt, Luoya hurriedly waved her hand to deny it. Noah Ayer smirked and once again confronted Ai Lizi. Miss Ai Lizzie, although you are Luo Ye's adopted sister, that doesn't mean you can represent him. Who knows, maybe the things you hate are the things he likes the most. Hee hee, your highness really knows how to joke. I know brother very well, more than anyone else. Sometimes, it is the other person's wishful thinking. Luo Ye looked at the two who were staring at each other without backing down. She silently lowered her head and turned into a stone statue. She followed the three-nose principle of not speaking, not moving, and not looking. They chased after the sheep all the way to the edge of the forest, but they still could not catch up. The soldiers could not help but become anxious. It was fine if they didn't see it, but even if they did, how could they let these gold coins and good ingredients run away? The commander of the Akkad private army, Duke, was anxious. He was already considering whether or not to dismount and try to chase after the sheep. After all, Duke was a source rank 4. Not to mention the long distance, it was still very easy for him to sprint faster than a horse. However, before the commander of the army could make up his mind, the running people found something strange. A powerful spell suddenly appeared in the team. When the soldiers felt it, they turned around and saw the young master Luoya, who they were supposed to protect, flying over their heads like a cannonball. At this time, Luoya's body was wrapped in white light. He held a silver blade in his hand, and a pair of wings of light appeared on his shoulders. After soaring into the sky and flying at high speed for a while, the black-haired young man fell to the ground like a meteor. With a loud bang, he smashed into the edge of the forest in front of the golden lambs. In the smoke screen, a terrifying aura rolled out, and a huge and terrifying shadow suddenly appeared in the sky where the light and darkness met. At this moment, the running golden lambs stopped as if they were collectively immobilized. They trembled under the gaze of the shadow. Those who were in a better state curled up on the ground, and those who weren't in a good state directly fell to the ground and couldn't get up. Of course, this powerful deterrence didn't only affect the monsters. The horses of the knights also stopped at the same time. There was a burst of people shouting and horses neighing, and some even began to run back in fright. Not good, we accidentally hurt our allies. That's enough, Gulan Dayer. Well, these little things really can't be scared. Glancing at the knights who were in a hurry in the distance, the shadow of the Gulan Dayer finally faded away. The huge skeleton didn't leave. It began to look at the soldiers and Luoya and began to talk about the animals of his time. Although the horses of my time weren't big, they were all quite good-looking. They could even grow horns on their heads. They were much better than these. Big brother, you're talking about unicorns, right? Luoya rubbed his chin as he listened to the words of the Gulan Dayer. He felt that there were only two possibilities for a horse that wasn't afraid of a giant. It was either the king of horses or the retard of horses. The black-haired young man listened to the rambling of the lonely giant. On the other hand, the soldiers on the other side were terrified. The pressure of the Gulan Dayer was too strong. Not to mention these animals, even humans would have a great deal of fear. And the deeper one's understanding of supernatural power, the more they would feel the terror. The commander of the Akkad private army, Duke, took 2 deep breaths. He looked at the pale faces of the royal guards and realized that their young master wasn't simple. The soldiers didn't understand the terrifying aura just now, but they could see further. That was an ancient existence that was difficult to understand and approach. It was a monster that made them unable to even think of resisting. Duke didn't know how Luoya controlled such an existence, but there was no doubt that this was an unimaginably strong force. Even the current Marquis Ka Dia didn't make Duke feel so powerless. Luoya, as the future heir of the territory, was able to reach such a level at such a young age. This future achievement, thinking until here, Duke reacted. He looked at Luoya who reappeared in the smoke and hurriedly ordered the stiff soldiers. What are you waiting for? It's rare for the young master to make a move personally. Hurry up and catch the sheep. Yes, yes. Chapter 123. Under a hill beside the official road, Duke and the others were setting up camp. Because of the last-minute hunt, the speed of Luoya's convoy was greatly slowed down. If they wanted to get to the town to rest, they would have to march through the night. For the Akat private army and palace guards who prioritized the safety of Luoya and Ai Lizi, this was too risky. Being ambushed at night was no joke. Many important people had failed miserably at night. Even if Duke had full confidence in his subordinates and palace guards, he didn't want to take unnecessary risks. Also, the current atmosphere wasn't suitable for marching. How many sheep are we going to kill? There are so many of us, we can't possibly eat all of them, right? Originally, the chefs wanted to kill 3, but the young master said that it wasn't enough to reward the whole army, so he added 2 more. Really? Shia bless Lord Luoya. A few soldiers who were skillfully building the barracks chatted happily, looking forward to the delicious food in the story. This was also the current atmosphere of the entire camp. The excited soldiers had smiles on their faces, the campfire was being prepared, the servants were preparing chairs for Luoya and Ai Lizi, and the chefs were working hard to harvest the wool of the golden lambs that were already slaughtered by the soldiers. Brother Luoya, the wool of these sheep is very precious, should we try to raise them? We can't do that. I've asked, after the golden lambs lose their wool, they will sense danger and speed up the process of mutation. Soon after, they will turn into a ferocious fawn. At that time, not only will they have no wool, their meat will also become hard. I see, no wonder the golden wool is so rare. It turns out that each sheep can only be harvested once. Yes, our hunt this time can be considered to have removed the hidden danger of monsters nearby. Otherwise, it would be difficult to deal with these sheep when they grow up. Luoya looked at the worker who was harvesting the sheep's wool. He felt that he had really gained both fame and fortune. Ai Lizi nodded her little head and looked at the young man beside her thoughtfully. Luoya and the others had chased after them for a long distance, so Ai Lizi didn't sense the power of the Gulandair. However, this didn't mean that she didn't notice anything strange. Ai Lizi saw the reverence in the eyes of the returning soldiers, Duke's warm attitude, and the subservient attitude of the palace guards. She immediately sensed that something was wrong. He heard that these sheep were stopped by Brother Luoya. It seemed that Brother Luoya had become a lot stronger recently. Ai Lizi thought back to a few months ago. At that time, Luoya was only at source grade 6. It was impossible for him to be admired by this group of elite soldiers above source grade 5. Brother Luoya never told me about supernatural powers. Ai Lizi thought about this and sighed. Because she hid the fact that she cultivated supernatural powers, Luoya had always treated her as a weak and ordinary girl. Although this allowed her to enjoy her brother's love, it also made it difficult for Ai Lizi to recognize Luoya's strength. He shouldn't be at source grade 4, right? Ai Lizi thought with a little guilty conscience. She already knew that Duke was at source grade 4 from Kadia. This military officer was serious and valued strength the most. Now that Duke was acting so respectfully, perhaps Luoya really was. Ai Lizi started to think that other people's supernatural powers were rising at the same speed as her own. She started to make baseless guesses and felt that she was too lazy. No. I still have to work hard. The silver-haired girl clenched her small fist. She was determined to protect Luoya. She felt that she had to catch up to her brother's footsteps. Moreover, considering Noah Iyer, the situation was even more urgent. Ai Lizi's journey of cheating sped up again. Luoya was watching the Akat family's chef's work. Of the 5 lambs that were slaughtered on the spot, 4 were roasted whole lambs, and the caramel reaction was used to produce the most delicious taste. The remaining 1 was used to stew soup with the mountain delicacies that the soldiers collected from nearby. The soldiers who were given the task of collecting the herbs had high morale. They had been outside for many years and were very clear about which wild plants were edible and which were tasty. They dug around in the forest and dug out many good things. Luo Ye looked at the mountain of mountain herbs and felt that Akhet should develop this area. For example, in his previous life, Luo Ye's White Mountain, Old Ginseng was a key area for a period of time. While Luo Ye, who saw everything as gold coins, was thinking, the other side had already started cooking. Not long after the 4 golden lambs were placed on the fire, a thick fragrance began to spread in the camp. Duke saw this and hurriedly increased the number of soldiers on duty, worried that the delicious food would attract wild beasts. After a busy period, the sun had completely set and the celebration feast began. Luo Ye and Ai Lizi enjoyed 1 golden lamb alone. The other 3 were left for the soldiers and officers in the camp. But in reality, with Luo Ye and Ai Lizi's appetite, they could only eat a few pieces of meat cut from the good parts. The rest would be given to the soldiers. Roasted whole lamb was not a delicate dish. The secret of the delicious taste was the quality of the ingredients. The golden lamb could be said to be the best in this aspect. The fat was evenly distributed, the meat was juicy, and the texture melted in the mouth. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. When eating, one had to look at the food and the atmosphere. Although the environment in the wilderness was not elegant enough, the smoke rising from the plains had a unique charm. The sound of laughter echoed in the ears. It was different from the exquisite banquets of the nobles, but it had a free and happy atmosphere. "Brother, don't you need some wine to relieve your boredom?" "No, no one drinks. I am no exception." Chapter 124. Someone from Sorophia is here, and we need to inform him. Beside the campfire, Luo Ye looked at the confused Duke, his small eyes filled with doubt. What's going on? Why would Sorophia suddenly appear? And to inform him once someone arrives, could it be, Ka Dia also took out loans when he was young? Saint Mestre's king of moneylenders, Luo Ye, suddenly felt a chill down his spine. It wasn't that Luo Ye was maliciously speculating about his father, but there were too many nobles who did this. Developing a territory usually required a large amount of funds, and the amount would depend on the scale of the development. However, it was obvious that most of the nobles wouldn't pay the full amount out of their own pockets. It was just like buying a house. There were people who paid the full amount, but that was only because they were rich and overbearing. Most of them would pay the down payment first, and then slowly work their way up. In Luo Ye's previous life, the financial institution was a bank, but in this world, it was a merchant association. Generally speaking, before developing a territory, the feudal lord would contact the local merchant association, and the merchant association would set the interest rate and pay a portion of the money. The territory would pay a portion of the money back every year, and it would take a few years or even a few decades to pay off the debt. Of course, this was only the simplest model. In reality, there were many things that could be discussed during the negotiations. For example, most feudal lords wanted the merchant association to be in charge of the logistics of the development of the territory. The nobles didn't know where the most durable tools were, so the merchant association had to send out experienced merchants to purchase them. The merchant association would also accept missions in exchange for some benefits and convenience, turning into a red-top merchant for a while. Generally speaking, developing a territory together with the merchant association was a mutually beneficial matter. However, as the saying goes, the greater the profit, the greater the risk. If the development failed, it would be a heavy blow to the noble family and the merchant association. As the largest merchant association in Xia, the Sorophia Merchant Association had developed countless territories together with the local feudal lords. Of course, there were some that succeeded, but there were a few that failed, and the feudal lords owed Sorophia a huge debt. Could it be that his father had done some development when he was young, or that one of his ancestors had done some work and owed money to Sorophia, the head of the capitalists, and was now being asked to repay the debt? Luo Ye's face turned green when he thought of this possibility. Damn it, he had already shouldered a debt of 500,000 yuan. If he had to repay his father's debt, then Luo Ye might as well sell himself to Noah as a pet. Did our territory engage in any large-scale development projects in the past? The black-haired young man carefully asked Duke. The middle-aged man blinked his eyes and smiled, which was a rare sight. Ha ha ha, young master, look at what you're saying. We are Akkad territory, how could we possibly engage in territorial development? What the hell? You're quite proud, aren't you? Luoya looked at Duke, who had an expression that said, young master, you're thinking too much. He suddenly felt that his ancestors were really something else. They could actually cultivate the pride of not developing their territory. How the hell did they do it? The young man rubbed his temples as he thought of this. He suddenly felt that it was a mistake for Heathcliff to give so much land to the Akkad family 1,000 years ago. Perhaps the royal family didn't expect this at that time. The Akkad family had generations of ambitious young men who would rather die than inherit their family's billions of assets. After generations, the billions of assets were about to grow, and the Akkad family was still keen on fighting. After silently complaining in his heart for a while, Luoya finally felt relieved. There shouldn't be any money owed to Sorophia. Then it's fine. Although Sorophia was powerful, the Akkad family wasn't bad either. The 5 grass-head kings of the theocracy weren't just for show. Sorophia might be a strong dragon in other places, but in Akkad territory, he really couldn't beat the local snake. Thinking of this, Luoya's confidence swelled. He was most afraid that he was in the wrong. As long as he didn't sign any contract with Sorophia, Luoya could ignore them. Besides, Luoya had sold them a high-quality requiem lamp before. Strictly speaking, he had formed a good relationship with Sorophia, so he should be thanking him. But speaking of Sorophia, I remember that in the game, the black-haired young man whispered in a low voice, and the figure of a girl with reddish-brown hair and emerald pupils appeared in his mind. Xiao Luot Sorophia, the eldest daughter of the Sorophia family, and also one of the 4 female protagonists of the game, Eye of the Recorder. Luoya's memory of the game was a bit blurry, and he didn't have much impression of this woman. He only remembered that she was a cold beauty. Xiao Luot's coldness was different from Ai Lizi's. Ai Lizi's coldness was a kind of cold and arrogant temperament, while Xiao Luot's coldness was her attitude towards people. She wasn't exactly a 3-nothingness, and it wasn't the kind of coldness that was targeted at someone. Instead, it was a natural personality that kept people at arm's length. In other words, Charlotte was a girl who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. The Sorophia family had a strange personality that seemed to be inherited from their family. They were especially stubborn, and they clearly distinguished between love and hate. This could be seen from their family history. As long as it was something they hated, even if it was a colossus like the Austin Empire, they would fight to the death. But if it was something they liked or loved, then they would show extraordinary friendliness. Xiao Luot could be said to have a typical family personality. She wouldn't hesitate to use any means to suppress those she hated, but she was willing to give up almost anything for those she liked. To be honest, Luoya didn't want to have any contact with this woman. The main reason was that Luoya didn't dare to guarantee that he could break through her hard shell and enter her heart. If that happened, it would be too difficult for him to turn things around. On the other hand, among the 4 female protagonists who ganged up on Luoya in the game, Xiao Luot did the least. She didn't even make a move. Luoya didn't know why, but from this fact, the conflict between the two didn't seem to be that big. So it was fine to leave her alone. Forget it, I'll just ignore her. Anyway, she doesn't seem to have anything to do with me. I'm very busy, elder brother, what have you been talking about since the beginning? Chapter 125. 1 month later, Akkad territory. Early in the morning, a beautifully decorated carriage slowly came from the end of the street. The logo on the carriage was somewhat unique. It was a strange pattern of an eye above a candle flame. If it was in a foreign country, it would probably be regarded as the symbol of a cult. However, in Akkad territory, this symbol was already known to everyone. At least in this month, its popularity had greatly increased. Of course, along with the candle flame symbol, there was another name. Luoya in Akot. The current acting lord of Akot territory, the young master of the Marquis mansion. For some unknown reason, he completely grasped the power of the territory and was now the #1 person in the Akot territory's government. It was admittedly good to have so many resounding titles, but when these titles were placed on the head of a 10-year-old child, the world's doubts would fill the sky and earth. Even though many officials didn't say anything, they still had some objections to Marquis Kadia's decision. One must know that Marquis Kadia was a well-known figure in the theocracy. No matter where he went, his name was well known. Although he was a little weak in governing the territory, he was still a big tree. Under the big tree, it was cool to enjoy the shade. The resistance to change and the nostalgia to beautify the past could be said to be a common human behavior. When Luoya first took office, his support among the people was actually quite low. However, no one expected that this situation would quickly change in just a short month. The carriage wheels turned and arrived at the entrance of the territory's government office. The door opened, the coachman placed the ladder, and the beautiful maid got off the carriage first and stood respectfully by the side. This scene had become a daily routine for the nearby residents in the past month, and it also became the focus of everyone's attention. When the black-haired youth's figure walked out of the carriage, and the moment his handsome and tender cheeks appeared, many passers-by stopped to look. The young girls who saw Luoya for the first time let out a short cry, and the women living nearby couldn't help but take a few more glances. "Oh, he's so good-looking." This was what most people were thinking at this moment. As he grew older, Luoya's achievements in the field of facial recognition were getting higher and higher. There were almost no flaws in his image, and humans were creatures that were dominated by vision to a certain extent. Luoya's popularity soared like a rocket as the number of times she appeared in public increased. Every evening, more and more young girls pretended to pass by on the streets. Some of them even rented houses nearby. Luoya was actually quite helpless against these users who only cared about appearances. These groups of fans reminded him of some bad things from his previous life. Fortunately, these people were more rational. Come to think of it, Noah Iyer seemed to be in the same situation as well. In fact, it was even more serious than Luoya. After all, the royal family had always been the center of gossip, be it in the previous life or the present. Thinking of this, Luoya felt a little more comfortable. After getting off the carriage, he looked around. Many people around him saluted him, and Luoya nodded his head in greeting. As it turned out, Luoya could rely on his face to make a living. However, how could he, who had great ambitions to clean up the mess left by his ancestors, do that? A lot of debt constantly urged him to improve, telling him that if he wanted to make a living, he had to rely on his talent. A month ago, when Luoya took over the power of the territory, the first thing he thought about was how to unite the people. During the transition between the old and the new, the officials lacked a sense of identity with the new leader. The civilians didn't care about politics and didn't know about the new leader. This was a very common phenomenon before the mass media coverage. Luoya's situation was especially serious because of his age. Expanding his influence became his priority, and he had to do it quickly. Speed was the most important thing in war. At such a critical moment, Luoya naturally couldn't be careless. Without saying a word, he took out 3 axes. The first one was to rectify the law and order. Although the Akate territory had the best law and order among the 5 noble families, it was actually referring to the overall environment. Most of the judgments were based on the number of bandits in the territory, whether the roads were smooth and safe, and other factors that were beneficial to the merchants. However, for the citizens of Akate City, some of the evildoers were more harmful to their lives. Petty thieves, ruffians, gangsters, loan sharks, and even human traffickers. These were the mountains that pressed down on the citizens. They often had a negative or even irreversible impact on their normal lives. Luoya, who had seen a lot of these evil forces in his previous life, hated them to the core. He was determined not to allow such vermin to run rampant in his territory. Thus, the slogan, "Eliminate Evil," which had never appeared in the theocracy before, was launched with Luoya's strong support. Luoya carefully selected the law enforcement officers. Luoya didn't touch the city guards and the militia. On one hand, he was afraid that they would collude with the local evil forces. On the other hand, he was worried that they weren't strong enough. Luoya, who had seen a lot of extraordinaries, had a little side effect recently. He estimated the strength of his opponents as high as possible. In addition, this was a special period, so he was really cautious to the extreme. Under such guidance, Luoya only had one choice left. That was the most loyal people, the Achaite private army and the palace guards who would escort him. Thus, Duke, who was at source grade 4, personally took the lead. All of them were at source grade 5. As a local, Duke's sources of information were too wide. The first time he worked for Luoya, he was even more enthusiastic. In less than a week, he sent over a list of 100 people. The crimes on the list were roughly divided into 3 categories. The first category was people who committed murder and human traffickers. The second category was people who hurt people and indirectly caused the destruction of people's families. The third category was people who robbed, extorted, stole, and fled the city. For this list, Luoya first demanded that the evidence must be conclusive. He couldn't be biased. After ensuring that the list was correct, he immediately ordered a heavy strike. First of all, the human traffickers had to be killed, especially those who abducted children. Luoya's guidelines for these kinds of criminals were to hang them all. Not a single one was left alive. Logically speaking, the prison wasn't a place where just any trash could live. In any case, it was taxpayers' money. Some of the more vicious criminals were directly sent to Xixia. As a grass-headed emperor, every lord had the right to change the laws in their territory. Before Luoya took action, he specifically changed the laws in this area. These evil forces would be dealt with severely. He was determined not to let them cause any more harm to the victims or retaliate against the informants. Under such a thunderous method, in just a short period of 10 days, the major gangs in Achaite City were all toppled. The loan sharks were arrested while fleeing, and the human traffickers were all caught. One after another, the hidden criminals were so scared that they lined up to surrender. They were afraid that they would be killed by Duke's troops. That's right. Because Duke's troops were all youths from the military, most of them had a strong sense of justice and a strong murderous aura. In addition to Luoya's orders, this group of source grade 5 enforcers would often be filled with righteous indignation when they saw criminals in the middle of a crime. Some of them were even killed on the spot. It had to be said that although these killing gods didn't follow the rules, the deterrence effect was too strong. Now, when the ruffians on the street saw the Achaite family's military uniform, their legs would go soft and they would tremble. Those who were timid would easily pee their pants. Chapter 126. So back to the old question, how do you gather the people's hearts? There was a saying in ancient times that whoever wins the hearts of the people wins the world, so for this difficult question, Luoya actually cheated. He had a wealth of knowledge that was different from this era. Putting aside the thousands of years of history of the Celestial Empire, Luoya, who was illuminated by the red star in his previous life, was very familiar with the topic of uniting the people. How to unite? To serve the people. The eyes of the people were bright. Whether a lord was good or bad, mediocre or incompetent, they could see all of these. Luoya was born a noble in this life, so it was impossible for him to walk among the people, but it was still possible for him to walk among the people. Although the special campaign against evil was a loss, and the Akat family even paid a sum of money to compensate the victims, it was in exchange for prestige and the people's hearts, which were difficult to buy with money. On the other hand, it also united Luoya's team. During the campaign, the finance department, the publicity department, and the special task force worked closely together. These officials who originally served Ka Dia were gradually familiar with Luoya, and they also had a preliminary sense of honor. Duke was very happy during the celebration. He was happy not only because he completed the mission, but also because he had the honor of upholding justice for the village. He gained a good reputation, and he was proud to work under Luoya. The same was true for the young people in the team. These people were loved by the people, and this was reflected in many aspects. Perhaps it was because they didn't need to pay for groceries, or perhaps it was because they were respected on the streets, but more than that, they were confessed to. That's right, this team quickly got rid of their single status in the process of serving the people. Some of them were even heroes saving beauties, and as their boss, Luoya, naturally didn't escape. He wasn't only watched by young girls, but in fact, the government building received more than 10 confession letters every day, and there were even daughters of officials who wanted to be his concubine. Of course, these requests were all rejected by Luoya with the reason that Ka Dia wasn't here. Luoya strolled into the Akat territory's government mansion and entered the lord's room. Leaning on the soft leather chair, he looked out of the window and sighed in relief. The first of the three-pronged policies was undoubtedly very effective and could be considered a good start. After that, Luoya's second and third-pronged policies followed. The Akat Territory Road Preparation Plan was a project that Luoya and the relevant staff had worked out over a period of several years. The goal was to open up the various villages and towns in Akat territory and build a transportation network, thus laying the foundation for future development. To put it bluntly, it was infrastructure. If you want to get rich, you have to build roads first. This sentence was sufficient proof of the importance that the Celestial Empire placed on infrastructure. Luoya, as an upright citizen of the Celestial Empire in his previous life, could be said to have been greatly affected. How could he talk about development if he couldn't even take a proper path? One must know that whether it was military or commercial operations, a good road was the main prerequisite. The last road preparation in Akat territory was a few decades ago when Ka Dia just took office. Now, it had been in disrepair for a long time and some places were impassable due to the rolling rocks. Of course, even though building roads was good, it was a huge project that required a lot of investment. Originally, Luoya wanted to seek financing from the Chamber of Commerce, but after looking at the pile of debt in his system, Luoya decided to leave a path for himself in the future. When he started, he would borrow as little as possible. In fact, even without the Chamber of Commerce, Luoya could do it alone because he could save a lot of money. Milton's Path of Nature, Forest Fairy Milton's research on the combination of nature and civilization. After cutting wood, it can produce wooden bricks that are as strong as rocks. When buried in the ground, they will take root and sprout. The wood elves still exist, but in a different way. Milton Sessions, Price, 30,000 points/stick, Acting Lord Memorial Event, 1,000 years of accumulation will give birth to precious wealth. 1,000 years of neglect will cause the territory to stagnate. Only wealth and prosperity can resist the butcher's knife of the enemy, 50% off. Milton's Path of Nature, Price, 10,000 points/stick. When Luoya saw the discounted items in the event area, it could be said that he instantly listed Milton's Path of Nature as a must-buy. All the other daily necessities paled in comparison. In ancient times, the cost of road construction was mainly concentrated in two aspects. One was manpower, which was unavoidable, and the other was the cost of the road itself. There were several types of roads. The worst wild road only needed to be compacted, but it was prone to weeds. Slightly better roads required soil frying. Better stone roads required large amounts of raw stones to be cut. On the other hand, brick roads required a higher cost because they needed to be refined and transported in a unified manner. The basic cost of refining the bricks, the fuel consumed during the firing, and the transportation after the firing. All of these added up to a huge sum of money. But with Milton's Path of Nature, all these could be saved. This item with a strange name was actually a set of tools that was enchanted with the Forest Fairy's exclusive curse. When wood was placed into the tool, it would produce wooden blocks that would increase in hardness. After being buried in the ground, it would take root like a tree. It was simply a divine tool for infrastructure in the mountainous forests. When Luoya first saw this item, he had doubts. What if it caught fire? But after testing it, Luoya realized that he was overthinking. This, Milton's path of nature, absorbed water and released water when it was on fire. It was harder to ignite than ordinary roads. Chapter 127. 2 years later. Rose Commercial United Nations, Rose City. In a classic office, a brown-haired middle-aged man sat behind a desk. In the middle of the room stood a girl with reddish-brown hair and emerald pupils. The man's name was Brosnan and the girl's name was Xia Luot. The two of them were the most famous father and daughter in the entire Rose. Everyone knew about their deep relationship. But now, the atmosphere in the room was different from usual. It was full of strangeness. "Father, why did you call me here all of a sudden?" The brown-haired girl sitting in front of the desk stared at the man in front of her curiously. She didn't know what was wrong with her usually resolute father. Xia Luot was puzzled because she was called back from the fringe by Brosnan using an urgent family letter. Normally, such a letter meant that something big had happened in the family. But when Xia Luot finally got home, Brosnan only asked about some trivial matters. It had been more than half an hour since then. Faced with Xia Luot's question, the middle-aged man sighed slightly. He recalled his daughter's marriage contract and rubbed his hands nervously. He felt that he should take things one step at a time. Ahem. Xia Luot, what do you think of the Akkad family? Akkad family? Are you talking about the Akkad dominion that borders us? If it's Akkad territory, it's a place with potential, but the lord there has always been incompetent. The brown-haired girl's vicious comments made Brosnan's eyebrows twitch. Then, the long list of data that the girl listed made him speechless. The territory's development rate was estimated to be less than 40%. The roads were broken, the transportation in the mountains was inconvenient, and the border tariffs were always at the bottom. Sometimes, it wasn't even enough to cover the cost of the border checkpoint. It was simply a miracle. All right. I know what you think of the Akkad dominion. You don't have to say anything more. Brian waved his hand to stop Xia Luot's business analysis. He felt that he had dug a hole for himself, so he didn't know what to say. The Sorofia family was a business family. Although they had gone to war, the tradition of doing business in the family had not changed. Sitting in the commercial center of Rose, they built their country on economics. When they looked at others, their focus would naturally be on economics and statistics. The Akkad family, as a neighbor whose valuation was always high but whose output was always at the bottom, naturally didn't have a good reputation among the Sorofia people. However, as the head of the family, Bruce didn't think so at all. From a merchant's point of view, Cot Hill was not good, but in terms of supernatural power and military, it was very good. After all, there was no such thing as a perfect territory. Loche developed his business, which was why he was prosperous, but Akkad chose military force, which was why it was stable. From the perspective of a ruler, Bruce had a very high opinion of Akkad. At least, Akkad was a good neighbor worth maintaining a close relationship with. As for Xia Luot's point of view, Bruce happened to have some material to refute. Xia Luot, do you know Luoya Akkad? Luoya Akkad. Oh, he's the only son of the current Marquis Kadia Akkad. I heard that he was very naughty when he was young. Later on, he seemed to have a good relationship with the Noa Iyer princess of the theocracy. Ahem. Let's not talk about his past or who he is backing. You have been busy with the fringe for the past 2 years, so the news is a little outdated. Take a look at this first, Bruce said as he handed the document to Xia Luot. The brown-haired girl took the document and read it carefully. Gradually, her eyes widened. The middle-aged man looked at the girl's reaction, which was almost the same as when he first saw the document. Indeed, the contents of this research report from Achaite Territory's Sorofia branch could be said to be explosive. The various data in it were somewhat unimaginable, to the point that Bruce had to send someone to investigate it and reconfirm its authenticity. The tariff increase is 150%. How is that possible? Xia Luot began to concentrate on the report. She carefully read the policies of Akat Hill for the past 2 years. The more she read, the more she felt that the policies were ingenious. First, there was a never-before-heard action called, Clean Up the Evil. The powerful military force was used to wipe out all the evil spirits in the territory. After that, there was a large-scale road construction that completely opened up the transportation network. After that, there was a cleanup of the city to raise the evaluation of the investors who came to inspect the city. Finally, there was a series of measures to encourage trade and a strange policy called poverty alleviation. The poverty alleviation policy was popularized by Luo Akat. It was meant to help the poor villagers become rich. The specific implementation was that the villagers would send workers to assist in the development of the village. The villagers would receive financial subsidies in the form of loans that would be slowly repaid over 10 years. This poverty alleviation policy was initially a joke among the lords who loved to scrape the land. Luo Akat was also ridiculed as a foolish young master who spent money recklessly for the sake of reputation. However, a year later, the data slapped these people's faces swollen. Akat Hill's tax revenue took off, and it wasn't a normal takeoff. It took off like a rocket, and it directly doubled. And this was only the first year. According to the internal documents of the Sorofia Chamber of Commerce, it was estimated that this rapid growth would continue for at least 5 years. How is it? Xia Luot, do you still think that Luo Akat is ignorant and incompetent? If this was really a decision made by him, then this person is not simple. Maybe he is a genius. The reddish-brown-haired girl couldn't help but praise. This made Bruce sigh in relief, and he also threw out his trump card. Not only that, Akat Hill recently submitted a cooperative development plan to us. It involves the entire southern part of Akat Hill and northern part of Rose. I think this plan is very good. What do you think? Chapter 128. In the depths of the Holy Capital's palace. Nuair. Wait, calm down, don't. Clang. In a dark room reserved for the banquet, a blonde girl and a black-haired boy stared at each other. 2 years had passed, and both of their appearances had changed a little. The black-haired boy, Luoya, was no exception. 2 years had made his appearance more similar to the one in his past life. He had lost some of his childishness and gained some of the toughness of a man. His face was less adorable, but more handsome and spirited. The biggest change was his height. Luoya had grown a lot in the past 2 years. His body was more slender, and his shoulders were wider. However, because his family had been practicing spells for generations, he had inherited a small bone structure. Therefore, he didn't look very muscular. Luoya had changed a lot, but it was still a little lacking compared to Nuair. As the saying goes, a woman changes 18 times between childhood and womanhood. Miss Angel's transformation was also obvious. Her blonde hair was still the same as before, but her temperament had lost a lot of her childishness. Gradually, she began to transform into a mature woman. She had grown taller, and her appearance had also become more mature. Her eyes and smile revealed confidence and dominance, and her aura had become more and more like a queen. She was less adorable than a child, and more attractive than a woman. Especially her chest, it was now a little bigger than the tablet 2 years ago. Simply put, she was becoming more and more beautiful. Looking at Nuair's appearance, Luoya would be lying if he said that he wasn't tempted. However, before that, he had to ensure his own safety. That's right. Standing in front of the blonde girl, he could feel that Noelle was too excited, and her emotions were a little out of control. The proof was that the two of them looked at each other for less than 5 seconds, and Miss Angel panted and pushed him to the ground before riding him. Luoya fell to the ground, and the chair fell to the ground with a clang. It was like a heavy hammer hitting the boy's heart. He held his breath and listened carefully. He noticed that no one in the corridor seemed to be coming to check on them. The boy let out a long sigh of relief and wiped his forehead. He couldn't help but look at the girl on top of him. Her cheeks were bright red. Are you crazy? There were so many people outside. Speaking of which, why did you bring me here for your birthday? Don't you care about the people who come to see you? I can't help it. It's been 2 years since we last met. I can't hold it in any longer. Can't help it. Wait, what are you doing? No, Oh. The young man's forced smile was broken. Before he could finish his words, his lips were forcefully kissed. Luoya's hands reached out to push the girl away, but his wrists were clamped down by an even greater force and pressed to the ground. Noah Iyer heard the noise of the crowd outside the door, and it gave the angel of abuse a different kind of pleasure. The intense excitement gradually heated up her body, and Noah Iyer relied on her last bit of rationality to separate herself. She felt that it was time for her to control herself. Phew, what are you doing all of a sudden? What are you doing? Kissing. So, a normal person would kiss in this position in the dark room after not seeing each other for 2 years? What's the matter? You've done this 2 years ago. The golden-haired girl curled her lips as if she was doing this with ease. Luoya, whose face was flushed red from the Noah Iyer's attack, was panting heavily. He struggled to retract his arms, but it was futile. Give up. I'm at origin level 4. You can't break free. So, why are you holding me down? Do you even need to ask? Of course, it's because I like the feeling of forcefully making you mine in a place where those noble ladies who surround you can't see. Ah, your expression is so cute. Seriously, don't seduce me like this. I seduced you my ass. Luoya could not help but retort at the golden-haired girl's perverted words. He struggled a little more, and looked at the beautiful Noah Iyer in a gown with a strong sense of aggression in her eyes. He gave up completely. I say, don't we talk every week? That counts as a meeting, right? You mean the few minutes of watching your sister by your side every week? Hee hee. Luoya's words made the golden-haired angel raise her eyebrows. Her words were full of sarcasm, and it was obvious that she was angry. Luoya's face was more or less embarrassed. Originally, using the Holy One's short blade skill, Afterglow of the Crown, the Noah Iyer's image could meet Luoya once a week for about 5 minutes. This skill was originally used by Miss Angel to check on him, but because the skill was mostly activated at night, when the Noah Iyer appeared, Luoya was usually together with the AI Lizzie. Chapter 129. In a short period of time, a close-range fight took place in the empty room. Luoya, who was in a disadvantageous position, actively resisted. He kicked his legs and stretched his arms like a carp king that had come ashore. However, even in the face of such fierce resistance, Miss Angel was still at ease. The golden spell flashed several times, and 2 golden rings wrapped around Luoya's wrists. Noah Iyer held his waist in place. Miss Angel gently moved her body twice, and Luoya's face turned red and he didn't dare to move. When you struggle, I'm really excited. You're really a pervert. It's been 2 years, and your mouth is still so bad. After several rounds of resistance, Roja's cheeks were caressed by the tyrant Noel. The girl's blue eyes were shining because of the power of the spell, and the sadistic smile on her face became heavier and heavier. Soon, she seemed to have thought of a good idea and tapped her hand. How about this, if you learn to bark like a dog and call me master, I'll consider letting you go. How about it? Miss Angel pinched Luoya's collar, and her eyes narrowed in excitement. She looked at the man under her with a face full of expectation and temptation. Although you want me to step on you, won't that dirty your clothes? Ah, or are you willing to accept my bare feet? I'll accept your ass. Facing this situation where it was either mental or physical abuse, Luoya's face twitched and he couldn't help but curse. The reason why he resisted so desperately was that he knew that it wouldn't be good if he was dragged in by this masochist. Speaking of which, you killed a lot of mutants in the eastern region, right? Shouldn't your fetish be satisfied? Ah, the screams of those monsters were indeed quite pleasant, but to be honest, they were a little low-level. Noah Iyer rubbed his chin with his finger and blinked, as if he was recalling the feeling of being in a sea of blood and a mountain of corpses. At first, I thought that I would be very excited, but after experiencing it, I felt that it was just a release of the evil and warlike side of my heart. After all, no matter how many dirty wild dogs there are, how can they be compared to my favorite pet? Miss Angel looked down with her burning eyes. She felt that her appetite had been spoiled by Luoya. After tasting the delicacies, that kind of coarse bread is just a temporary buffer. So, what do you think? What do you think? You're such a sadist. Luoya cursed madly in his heart and began to think about how to break out of this situation. However, before he could do anything, a cold voice suddenly came from behind the two of them. Your Highness Noah Iyer, can you please stop bullying my elder brother? Tisk, the moment she heard this voice, the golden-haired girl was speechless. She straightened her body and turned around, only to see the silver-haired girl staring at her coldly. 2 years had passed, and AI Lizzie had changed a lot. Her petite body had grown a lot in these 2 years, and she had become more ladylike. Her face had lost some of the fleshy feeling of a child and became more delicate. Her pair of red eyes were still the same, and her temperament like that of a flower on a high mountain was more obvious. Now, AI Lizzie's beauty was famous in the theocracy. Her soul-stirring beauty was like a mass-produced machine of love at first sight. Many nobles were addicted to her beauty and desperately tried to curry favor with her. However, in the face of these fanatical pursuers, AI Lizzie did not show any mercy and secretly taught them a lesson many times. However, unlike in the outside world, when Luoya was in front of this cold and unapproachable girl, she would suddenly transform and throw herself into his arms with a smile. Noah Iyer was speechless at AI Lizzie's behavior of pretending to be an obedient child in front of Luoya. And Luoya was indeed deceived by her pretense. Every time, she would patiently comfort the frightened AI Lizzie and use her young age as an excuse to reject all the suitors. Of course, those dissatisfied nobles had also sent letters to the two's father, Marquis Kadia, but they were all like stones thrown into the sea. Noah Iyer understood this. AI Lizzie was a genius, and Marquis Kadia would never let her go unless his brain was knocked out by a mutant. AI Lizzie, I haven't seen Luoya for 2 years. Don't you think it's a little inappropriate to interrupt us at this time? The blonde girl turned her head and narrowed her eyes. Her expression was obviously not good. AI Lizzie heard her and said indifferently. I can understand your feelings, Your Highness, but as the main character of the birthday party after 2 years, your absence has caused a commotion. Of course, the most important thing is that Father is back. Father? AI Lizzie's words caused Luoya to react violently. Noah Iyer's expression also changed when she heard this. She removed the restraints of the curse, and Luoya immediately sat up. Marquis Kadia had been the logistics department head for the front lines for more than 2 years. During this period, he had only returned home once. It could be said that they rarely met up. Now that he had suddenly returned to the holy capital, it was a pleasant surprise for Luoya. Father is back from the front lines? Didn't he say that he couldn't make it to the birthday party because of a mission? It seems that he completed it ahead of time. Chapter 130. He has a marriage contract. How is that possible? Why don't you know about it? You heard it too. It was a marriage contract signed 100 years ago. Father never mentioned it, so of course I don't know about it. Then what do we do now? It's fine if it's someone else, but it has to be that Sophia's Xia Luot. In the palace, Noah Iyer and Ai Lizzie were blaming each other on both sides of the tea table. The source of their worries was undoubtedly the news brought by Ka Dia, who rushed back a few days ago. Luo Ya Kot, the lover of Noah Iyer and Ai Lizzie, had known them for 3 years. However, a few days ago, during the banquet, he suddenly received an explosive news. He had a fiancée, and this fiancée was a very powerful person. Xia Luot Sophia was a beauty whose name spread throughout Xia. It was said that her beauty was as flawless as the fairies in the myths. She was an existence that made people want to give her everything they had when they saw her. She was an existence that would make people burn with love and lust. Of course, this was only her appearance. In terms of status, she was the eldest daughter of the Sophia family and the future leader of the family. In terms of personal talent, it was said that she was a rare business genius, a top designer, and an artist in the fashion industry. She was an all-rounder that no one could find fault with. It's troublesome, it's really troublesome this time. It's fine if it's someone else, but definitely not Xia Luot. Your Highness, you've seen her before. Yes, I've seen her once. It was last year when I visited Rose before I went to the front lines. When Ai Lizzie asked this question, Noah Iyer responded with silence. After hearing this question, Miss Angel frowned. After a long time, she finally spoke with difficulty about her feelings at that time. I'm moved. What? I said that the moment I saw her, my heart sped up. Do you understand? The Noah Iyer held her forehead as if she had given up on herself. She couldn't believe what she was feeling. The silver-haired girl stared at the Noah Iyer and suddenly stepped back in fear. Miss Angel was stunned. Ai Lizzie. What are you thinking? For the record, I don't like girls. No, Your Highness, you don't have to explain. I actually support you. Ai Lizzie waved her hand with an understanding expression that said, you'd better find that Xia Luot and spend the rest of your life together. This made Noah Iyer even angrier. That's why it's strange. That girl has a kind of magical power. It's not charm, but something of a higher level. Perhaps it's because of her bloodline, but she has a strange sense of nobility. Nobility? Yes, and the rumors about her appearance weren't exaggerated. That girl's charm is real. That's why I said it's too dangerous. If even I am moved, how can Luoya not be moved? Noah Iyer muttered to herself as she clenched her fists. She suddenly thought of Wei Duolia's situation. In history, Wei Duolia's relationship was thwarted because Ponte got married first. She endured for more than 20 years. Noah Iyer felt that it was already very miserable. She didn't expect that it would be even worse for her. Luoya also had a marriage contract. Once she became a Noah Iyer, she wouldn't even be able to endure. Endure until an elf dies? Isn't this a joke? No. We can't just sit here and wait for death. We have to find a way to stop this marriage. But what should we do? This kind of marriage contract is 100 years old. Elder brother can't unilaterally reject it, right? Ai Lizzie's words caused the atmosphere in Noah Iyer's room to become heavy. There was no way to unilaterally reject it. This was the most troublesome part about marriage contracts. Setting aside the novels for now, in reality, almost none of the nobles would break off a marriage contract. The more powerful the nobles were, the more likely they were to break off all pretense of cordiality. At the end of the day, it didn't matter if two people were suitable for each other in a political marriage. As long as the person married into the family, it was fine. Most people would marry in name even if they weren't suitable for each other. For example, Ponte even fulfilled his obligation to have a child. Noah Iyer began to feel dizzy at the thought of Xia Luot fulfilling her obligation to have Luoya's child. Ai Lizi's face also turned pale and her body swayed. The marriage contract must be reasonable. Both parties must agree to it. Luoya's side is fine, but Xia Luo's side is almost impossible. Why? She doesn't even know elder brother, but she wants to marry him. Chapter 131. It's finally here. After 2 years, the flag is here again. In the study of the Akat family, Luoya's heart was beating fast as he touched the information in front of him. 3 years ago, in this study, the young Luoya's body was trembling as he flipped through the book, looking at the familiar family name. After that, one flag after another and difficulties came one after another. Ai Lizi, Noah Iyer, these geniuses, one by one, formed a connection with him. There were thrills and crises in the process, but they were all resolved by Luoya. Even the 2 geniuses were roped in by him. Now, Akat territory was steadily developing under his rule. The flag of the family was not completely removed, but at least there was no problem for now. In the system, Luoya had already paid 150,000 gold coins in the past 2 years. Although there was still 350,000 gold coins left, it was barely enough to cover the tax revenue of the territory. The old challenges were over, a new future awaited him, and new challenges were about to come. Xia Luo Tserofia, this character was Luoya's new flag. To be honest, Luoya was not as familiar with this character as Noah Iyer. He did not have time to play Xia Luo's side quests, but according to the information in the public line, Luoya could roughly summarize a few characteristics of Xia Luo. First, she was conventionally good-looking. There was nothing much to say about this, it was just that she was not as stunning as a 2D character. Second, she was cold to people she was not familiar with, and was almost uninterested. Third, she was multi-talented. She was a real aristocratic young lady, but she was not weak. Fourth, she was good at strange curses. Usually, she needed money or gems as a catalyst. Fifth, Xia Luo was very filial. She had a good relationship with her father, but her family was more chaotic. The black-haired young man racked his brain to recall, and finally confirmed these points. He then began to analyze. If he wanted to remove the flag, there was no doubt that favorability was an important indicator. Whether it was Ai Lizi or Noah Iyer, their favorability had been boosted by Luoya. Originally, Luoya wanted to hide from Noah Iyer, but the results later proved that it was useless. And this time, facing Xia Luo, as the betrothed, there was no way he could hide. Betrothed, this was a unique identity. To be honest, Luoya felt that it was a bit troublesome. At the banquet, when Kadia told Luoya about this, Noah Iyer and Ai Lizi had a huge reaction. The blonde girl lost her manners for the first time, and anxiously asked Kadia what was going on. The silver-haired girl tugged at Luoya's clothes and was about to cry. Without a doubt, giving up 2 flags for one was an unwise move. Luoya did not want to be hated for neglecting Ai Lizi or Noah Iyer one day, and then be stabbed in the back. Stabilizing the foundation was what Luoya had to do. And from another point of view, this engagement was also the easiest to remove, because in the original work, Xia Luo clearly hated this engagement. It was obvious that when a young girl was suddenly appointed as a fiancée, she would not be happy about this kind of thing. Some would even have an extreme reaction. As for Xia Luo, Luoya felt that she was the type of person who would stubbornly stand up for her family. The reason was that in the game, Xia Luo's attitude towards Luoya was very cold. She had once revealed to the protagonist that she did not like him, but because of certain reasons, when the protagonist and others ganged up on Luoya and beat him to death, Xia Luo did not do much, but she also did not show any mercy. From this, it could be seen that in the game, Luoya did not remove the engagement, and even used it to threaten Xia Luo. If the current Luoya did the opposite and was willing to cooperate with her to remove the engagement, and return Xia Luo her freedom, then wouldn't it be easy to gain a large amount of affection points? Of course, the removal of the engagement was only one aspect. If she wanted to completely turn Xia Luot into an ally, then she had to start with her family. Xia Luot had a good relationship with her father, and she was also a person who managed a large family. If she wanted to have a good relationship with such a person, then naturally she would not do anything without her family. In other words, as long as Achates territory and Luoya were in a honeymoon period, then even if Xia Luot hated Luoya, she would not do anything. In this regard, Luoya had many methods. Due to the threat of his family's decline, Luoya had worked extra hard in the past few years. Now, the villages in the southern mountain forest were much more prosperous under his management than 2 years ago. Every month, the number of carriages coming and going on the official road in rows increased. Now the only problem was the Warren Mountain range in the south of Achates territory. It extended out of the territory and into Rose's territory. The Warren Mountain range covered a large area and was rich in resources. Normally, there should be a lot of treasures in it, but it had not been properly developed for a long time. Luoya had already submitted an application to Sorot. If the proposal was approved, the two sides would become partners and jointly develop this treasure land. This way, one was to share the risk, and the other was to gather the strength of both sides to explore further. With this relationship, as the acting lord of Achates territory, Luoya had obtained Rose's goodwill and recognition. The two sides would become a community of interests. In this case, his relationship with Xia Luot would naturally become closer. Very good, no problem, no matter how I look at it, this carriage will not flip over. In order to leave a good impression on Xia Luot, Luoya could be said to have racked his brains. From the day's weather to the itinerary, Luoya checked everything, and even found a famous designer to design the dress. Xia Luot was a fashionista, so Luoya naturally could not appear too old-fashioned. The Achates family was more serious and based on the military, so Luoya ordered a slim-fit dress with elements of a military uniform. It was designed by Sorot's retired design master, Carter. He also had another identity as Xia Luot's fashion design teacher. Luoya did not believe that there would be any mistakes. As for the decoration of the house, after some research, the Achates family decided to abandon the luxurious and exquisite style and go for a classical style. There was no other way, no one could compete with Sorot in terms of money, so they might as well compete with their history and heritage. Achates family was a 1,000-year-old family. They did not have anything else but the collection of their ancestors and antiques. Luoya waved his hand, and the servants immediately began to move out according to type. In short, if he wanted to have a good relationship, at least he could not weaken his reputation. True friendship could only be achieved in a relationship of equals. Luoya's goal was to cooperate with Xia Luot to smoothly dissolve the engagement, keep his foundation, and then become good friends and business partners with her. After some planning, the young man was already confident. However, what he did not know was that the two girls were also secretly preparing. Chapter 132. Brother Luoya, can you sleep with me tonight? This isn't appropriate. At the dinner table, the silver-haired girl looked pitifully at Luoya after eating, and made a request that put the black-haired youth in a difficult position. For the past 2 years, because of Ai Lizi's insistence, Luoya gradually stopped feeding her. The youth understood this very well. After all, Ai Lizi was already 10 years old. Due to the magic element, the residents of this world were like fertilizer. At 14 years old, they were considered adults and could get married. Ai Lizi didn't need anyone to take care of her anymore. But at the same time, a strange request gradually appeared, and that was that Ai Lizi always liked to crawl into his bed. Generally, there were 3 reasons. Woo, Big Brother, the stories in the spell books are so scary. Big Brother, I'm having nightmares. Brother Luoya, I miss you. That's right, the first 2 reasons were sufficient, but the third was simply a forced reason. Luoya naturally rejected such a reason. He was already 12 years old this year, and his body was already developing. How could he be like AI Lizzie who didn't know anything? But although he thought so, he couldn't reject reality. Every time Luoya steeled his heart and rejected AI Lizzie, the silver-haired girl would hug her pillow and cry. Big brother, do you not like AI Lizzie anymore? Do you find AI Lizzie annoying? Thinking of AI Lizzie's pitiful sobbing, Luoya felt like he was going to have a heart attack. Once, he felt that it wasn't right to spoil AI Lizzie like this, so he forced the girl out of his room. In the end, he closed his eyes for the entire night and saw the girl wiping her tears as she left alone. He tossed and turned for the entire night without sleep. From that day onwards, Luoya understood that he couldn't reject the crying AI Lizzie. But that was just that, he couldn't go on like this. Because of their bloodline, AI Lizzie had become more and more beautiful in the past 2 years. No matter what, they weren't related by blood, so it was easy for problems to arise if they slept together. AI Lizzie, you've grown up, I don't think it's appropriate for us to sleep together anymore. At the dining table, Luoya pondered for a long time. The silver-haired girl looked at Luoya's golden eyes for a moment, then asked softly, Big brother, is it because you already have a fiancé? What does this have to do with a fiancé? Luoya's words, Miss Xia Luot, who has a fiancé, compared to AI Lizzie, your fiancé's SS, your fiancé, your fiancé, your fiancé, after all, your S-Miss is a company hers, SAS the girl spoke, her voice gradually lost its calm. She took 2 deep breaths and turned her head to avoid looking at the dazed Luoya, as if she didn't want him to see the helplessness and weakness in her eyes. Luoya stared blankly at the girl opposite him. He suddenly felt that he had been so busy preparing to pull off Xia Luo's flag that he had neglected AI Lizzie. To put himself in her shoes, if AI Lizzie was busy meeting her fiancé, then Luoya, fiancé my ass. I'll break his legs for him. After thinking about it for a moment, Luoya suddenly felt a surge of anger in his heart, but he quickly sobered up. The youth coughed twice and tried his best to avoid the reality that he was a siscon. Yes, fiancé and whatnot are all the poison of a traditional marriage. How can I let AI Lizzie suffer such a loss? Even if she really likes him, she has to be free to fall in love. Of course, it has to be the kind that Luoya personally checks. After letting his imagination run wild for a while, Luoya's thoughts returned to the dining table. He looked at the silent AI Lizzie and sighed. For the umpteenth time, the love in his heart had won over his rationality. Okay, but let me say this first, at most once a month from now on. The black-haired youth sighed and said so. In the next moment, AI Lizzie's face regained its smile, and she jumped off the chair and rushed into Luoya's embrace. Thank you, big brother. You're already so old, but you still like to act like a spoiled child. It has nothing to do with age, girls will always act like a spoiled child to the person they like. Okay, really. Luoya blushed a little at AI Lizzie's words, and his heart felt a little itchy. After dinner, the two held hands and went to the study to chat and read. Chapter 133. In front of the desk lamp in the study room, Luoya looked at the translation of the letter written in ancient Austin, and his expression gradually changed. The content of the letter was very short, and there was no difficulty in translating it. Luoya understood every word, but he couldn't understand them when they were connected together. The content of the letter was roughly as follows: To the Lord, around the middle of April, I will arrive at the Twin Horn Port with the egg. Queen. The black-haired boy looked at the translated content and fell into silence, and the silver-haired girl on his shoulder was also confused. Brother Luoya, what does this mean? Let me take a look. After finishing everything, the young man retracted his gaze. He looked at the contents of the letter, raised his hands, and summarized the key words. Lord, egg, queen. Through these, he could think of an ancient royal family, looking for a child with a lot of money. Damn, This isn't a brothel letter, right? Luo Ye's expression changed as he recalled the shelf of pornographic books in the Labyrinth Library. He suddenly felt that this letter had a special fetish. This egg and the queen, could it be some kind of invitation letter? The boy's face turned red as he felt Ai Lizi's gaze and quickly shook his head to force himself to calm down. No, it shouldn't be. 200 years old pornographic books are already strange enough. Could there be a few 100 years old pornographic books? Yes, the egg, it didn't say it was a human egg. There was a port in the letter, so it was most likely a fish egg. Maybe the ancestor of Akkad just wanted to eat some caviar. But what's with this queen? There isn't a queen in the caviar business, right? She even went to the sea personally. Isn't that a little too low? Are you also the Prince of Planet Mayonnaise? Lord, Queen, it sounds like a chess title. Yes, these titles can't be some kind of code name, right? Luo Ye blinked as he was reminded by Ai Lizi's words. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was the case. After all, although the word Lord matched the identity of the head of the Akkad family, it was still uncertain whether the recipient was the head of the Akkad family. Thinking about it this way, it might be an internal letter from some organization. As for what kind of organization it was, there were two possibilities. One was a political organization, and the other was an organization of superhumans. Considering the fact that the Akkad family had been so well behaved for so many years that they were about to decline, the first possibility was probably impossible. The most likely possibility was that a member of the Akkad family had joined a transcendent organization a few hundred years ago, codenamed Overlord, and had some cooperation with this queen. It was probably related to this egg. Both parties should have agreed to meet at Twin Horn Harbor. Judging from the date, this queen should have traveled a long way, and it was very likely that she had taken a boat. After all, there's an anchor on the wax, but it's really unique when paired with a rose. Wait, golden rose? The black-haired youth stared at the pattern on the wax seal and suddenly realized that he seemed to have seen this pattern before. Isn't the golden rose the emblem of the Sorofia family? Sorofia? Big brother, you're saying that this letter is from the Sorofia family? Hearing the name that gave her a headache recently, the silver-haired girl's expression became strange. She looked at the letter on the table and suddenly felt that Luo Ye's praise when she found the item wasn't very good. Can I put it back? Ai Lizi sincerely thought so, but Luo Ye shook his head after thinking for a while. Chapter 134. Xia Luo Sorofia looked up at the starry sky, and she felt a little uneasy. It had been 5 days since Lo She left. Xia Luo's convoy had left the country, crossed the Warren mountain range between the two territories, and entered the southern part of Akkad territory. As a veritable rich family, Sorofia's convoy was obviously different. The dragon-like convoy was followed by a regular guard of 500 people. Although it wasn't a lot, it was quite professional. It was Xia's most famous mercenary group that specialized in defense. It was a pagan legion that had signed an agreement with Lo She all year round. Their source substance was perseverance, and the god of the source substance was the ancient Mother Earth, who had fallen in the First Era. Generally speaking, the risk of degeneration was very low, and their reliability was very high. Mercenary was one of the few proper professions that pagans could engage in. Therefore, Xia's famous mercenary group was basically composed of pagans. They generally wouldn't accept missions in Saint Maester's territory. However, as the saying went, there was no problem in the world that couldn't be solved with money. If there was, the biggest possibility was that there wasn't enough money. This time, the escort was really honorable. It was the eldest daughter of Sorofia, and the money was really high. It was 10 times the usual amount, and the mission wasn't dangerous, and the distance wasn't far. With these few conditions, what could the unyielding church, who had been relying on Lo She all year round, do? It wasn't easy to offend a rich person. Besides, money, it was really good. The unyielding church's mercenary group was very expensive, but in addition to the fixed escort fee, Xia Luo's personal belongings were also very luxurious. It was beyond the imagination of most people in this world, even the nobles. Strictly speaking, Xia Luo wouldn't travel, but her house was moving. Xia Luo's moving tool was called the gem necklace, and it was made up of 16 carriages. 16 carriages, this was the standard for Xia Luo's travel. Each carriage was a large caravan, which was equivalent to a separate room. The bedroom, study, living room, kitchen, and even a small garden for afternoon tea were included in these 16 rooms. However, it was not a big deal if it was only 16 caravans. The great nobles from other places could also get a set, or even bigger and more. The reason why Sophia's jewel necklace caravan was famous all over the world was because it used a unique spell technique. There was a door in every room of the gemstone necklace caravan, and this door was passable. For example, Xia Luo felt sleepy in the study and wanted to go to the bedroom to sleep. Normally, the motorcade would first stop all the cars and ask the owner to get out of the car and move. However, in the gemstone necklace motorcade, Xia Luo felt completely at home. She could directly go to the bedroom after opening the door and entering the living room. That's right. The spell technique that allowed one to jump between carriages was the true uniqueness of the gemstone necklace. Compared to that, the luxurious and exquisite decorations in the carriages were a drop in the bucket. Therefore, unless Charlotte took the initiative to step out of the carriage, she wouldn't be able to feel any sense of reality. And now, it was Xia Luo's rare time to walk out of the carriage. Looking at the stars in the sky, the brown-haired girl did not have her usual confidence and boldness. On the contrary, she was somewhat confused and even weak. A marriage contract was not something that could be easily ignored by any girl. In Xia, where political marriages were popular, traditional marriages based on benefits had always been common among the nobles. It could be said that the marriage contract was born for this reason. From the moment it was born, it was based on benefits. Therefore, it did not need to consider the feelings of both parties. Everyone in the marriage contract was purely a condition in order to achieve a result that was in line with their interests. Xia Luo had a sense of fear and natural resistance to marriage contracts. It was just like any young girl who suddenly found out that she was going to become husband and wife with someone she did not know. It was natural for her to refuse. And from the experience of her family, Xia Luo did not think that this kind of abnormal product could breed happiness. Xia Luo's mother was the best example. She was born in a great noble family in the Austin Empire. Because of the marriage contract, she married her father, Bruce, with the purpose of easing the long stiff relationship between Loche and the Austin Empire. It turned out that this goal was achieved, but the price was that Xia Luo's family was completely broken. Xia Luo's mother was a believer in the Austin Empire's orthodoxy. She was stubbornly biased against Loche. After giving birth to Xia Luo, she was not even willing to raise her by herself. After a few years, she returned to the country and lived separately. Xia Luo and her father, Bruce, depended on each other for survival. The relationship between father and daughter was very good, but Xia Luo's only memory of her mother was a few years ago when she visited the Austin Empire. That woman looked at her indifferently and did not smile. Her family made Xia Luo have a natural dislike of traditional marriage, but Xia Luo's experience in this regard was not limited to that. Sophia was a great family, and Xia Luo had many relatives. In Bruce's generation, in order to expand Loche's influence, political marriage was the task of almost everyone in the family. Xia Luo's aunt was brutally abused by a cruel noble, causing one of her eyes to have vision problems. Her cousin also stayed alone in an empty house for many years because of her dissolute husband, and she still did not have a child. On the surface, nobles were all gentlemen, but there were too many variables in their moral character. There were very few good people who were strict and had high moral character. Faced with this situation, how could Xia Luo, who was about to follow in her footsteps, not be afraid? The girl was afraid, but at the same time, she also had some hope. Xia Luot, your marriage contract was signed 100 years ago. After 100 years, you were born at the same age. This might be a kind of fate. Bruce's words echoed in the girl's ears, and Xia Luot's heart couldn't help but be moved. Fate, this word had a special meaning in the Serophia family. It was said that the first generation of Highland elves belonged to the goddess of fate. They were existences who could see the flow of fate, and were also the origin of prophecy and divination. This word had a unique charm. Although it was small, it did move Xia Luot's heart, and made her yearn and fantasize that she'd belong to a girl of her age. What if this boy who was the same age as her wasn't so terrible? Although the previous rumors about Roja were unbearable, but since more than 2 years ago, Serophia's investigation documents gradually had a good evaluation. Now that he is the acting lord, he should have some achievements, so there is nothing wrong with meeting him a little, right? At the very least, this was someone who was the same age as Xia Luot, and not the age of the other country's royalty, who often jumped from 30 to 30. In terms of appearance, Xia Luot didn't have high requirements. In fact, she didn't care about strength either. As long as he was upright, honest, kind, and could give her happiness and a complete and harmonious family, she was willing to give it a try. For this reason, she specially sent her personal maid to investigate. "Gulacy, you have to help me look carefully." Under the night sky, the girl whispered softly, and her words traveled far with the wind. Chapter 135. Gulacy Sadie, the second daughter of the famous Sadie family in Rosetta. She had been hired by the Serophia family since she was a young girl and had accompanied Xia Luot since she was young. Like any maid who had accompanied their master since they were young, Gulacy and Xia Luot had a deep relationship. This deep relationship was also the reason why Gulacy still insisted on staying by Xia Luot's side. Gulacy was born in a transcendent family and was naturally gifted. Under Serophia's nurturing, she had reached source rank 3 before the age of 30. Although it was partly due to the resources, with such strength at such a young age, she could easily become a powerful person in Rosetta and take charge of a department or even an army. However, under such circumstances, Gulacy had rejected all invitations, even orders from her family. "Don't go." For years ago, when the 8-year-old Charlotte had shakily grabbed her sleeve and choked with sobs, Grace had already made her choice. Although she was a maid, she still had the feelings of an elder sister towards her family's young miss. The relationship between the two of them was not so much that of a master and servant, but more like that of a sister. As the saying went, reincarnation was a skill. To most people in the world, having Serophia behind their name represented wealth and glory. However, in reality, Xia Luot, who was at the core of the family, had an unfortunate childhood. As a personal maid, Gulacy had personally witnessed Xia Luot's misfortune. It was a treatment even crueler than that of a single-parent family. Xia Luot's mother, that stupid pure-blooded Austin woman, hated her own daughter and even felt ashamed of her. For a little girl to be hated by her own mother, this kind of behavior was far more harmful to the child than one could imagine. It was even more terrible than physical abuse. Because of this, the young Xia Luot had a serious psychological shadow. After the bloodline awakening, Xia Luot gradually improved. However, when it came to marriage and family, Xia Luot would still reflexively reject and fear. To be honest, Gulacy strongly opposed her young miss marriage this time. The maid believed that only free love could truly heal Xia Luot's trauma. However, unexpectedly, she didn't know what kind of magic potion Bruce had fed Xia Luot, but the young miss actually agreed to meet with him. Since her master had made her choice, as a servant, Grace naturally couldn't say anything. However, she raised her greatest vigilance and decided to check on her perfect and delicate young miss first. In Luo Ye's previous life, ordinary netizens would often send their best friends to scout ahead. In this life, the nobles weren't stupid. Before the marriage, they would naturally send their trusted aides to scout ahead. Of course, this observer naturally had to be someone they trusted the most. The reason was definitely not to see how the other party looked like. For example, this time, Golesi came to scout ahead and inform the Akhat family of Miss Sorofia's living habits so that the Akhat family could prepare accordingly. This was a very normal procedure for nobles visiting a foreign land. After all, the customs and habits of each country were different. Some people did need to be notified in advance. For example, some countries didn't eat mutton, so a lamb chop for dinner would be very awkward for both parties. The reason was sufficient, but the real point was to scout ahead. Golesi felt that she had a heavy responsibility on her shoulders and vowed to find out reliable first-hand information. Luoya, what was the character of Akhat? What was the Akhat family like? Golesi came to visit with questions one after another. Unfortunately, she didn't know that a large net had been opened more than half a month ago, spanning from Saint Lorraine to Akhat territory, waiting for them to jump into it. Sorofia family's personal maid, Golesi Sadie. I'm very happy to visit your house. Akhat family's personal maid, Anna Eduardo. I represent the Akhat family to welcome your arrival. In front of the entrance, Golesi, who led the team, greeted Anna, who came out to welcome them. She was neither servile nor overbearing, and her smile was natural. It could be said that they were on par with each other. Under the clear attitude of the two leading ladies, the tone of the harmonious atmosphere was set almost immediately. Sorofia and Akhat didn't have any intention of dwarfing each other, but they both abided by etiquette. Such a respectful attitude obviously won Golesi's favor. In the past, she had visited many noble families as an emissary of Xia Luot. The servants of the large noble families were too arrogant, and the small noble families were too humble. There were countless such situations. In this aspect, the Akhat family's performance could be said to be very appropriate. The bearing and upbringing of a servant to a certain extent reflected the style of the master. Based on this, it could be inferred that the Akhat family had a deep upbringing. It was worthy of being a large family with thousands of years of inheritance. Making a plus sign in the small notebook in her heart, Golesi and Anna entered the marquis residence together. When they first entered, Golesi didn't have any reaction. The accompanying Sorofia family servants also didn't have any reaction. Although the decoration of the Akhat family's residence was good, it wasn't considered luxurious, and it didn't cause any surprise. But as the two sides communicated and moved, the expression in Golesi's eyes gradually began to change. She looked at the sculptures placed in the corner of the hall, the works of art hanging on the wall, and even the small decorations in the corner of the stairs. She gradually discovered that something was wrong. Antiques. They were all antiques, and many of them were old objects that were more than a few hundred years old. As Sorofia's personal servant, Grace could be said to have seen the various aristocratic families of rosettes. Some of them were resplendent in gold and jade, while some pretended to be elegant. However, she had never seen a family as ancient and elegant as the Akhat family. Even the somewhat low-key style was something she had never seen before. As expected of a family with thousands of years of history, the entire residence was filled with antiques. The value of these antiques was much higher than the decorations made of gold and jade. Golesi sighed in her heart, adding another point in the small notebook in her heart. Now, she was quite satisfied with the Akhat family. They had style, they had a deep foundation, they were rich, and their servants were respectful. Next, she just had to look at the young master Akhat who was her fiancé. Young Master Luoya hasn't woken up yet? Yes, young Master Luoya stayed up late to study last night, so he woke up a little late today. Oh, I see, I was rude. Hearing the reasonable explanation, Golesi softly apologized and nodded while looking at the closed door. Being diligent in studying is a good point, but he should pay more attention to his body. Thinking so, the servant girl smiled, but the next moment, the door suddenly opened a gap, and a beautiful silver-haired girl came out of Luoya's room in front of everyone with her clothes in a mess. At this moment, the crowd was silent, and Gulacy's smile froze on her face. Chapter 136. The moment she saw AI Lizzie, Gulacy's brain froze for a whole second. This was a huge mistake for her as in source rank 3. From this, one could see how much of an impact this scene had on her. Studied too late last night. What did she study? Was it physiology? Grace froze. Behind her, the servants of the Sorofia family froze. The servants of both families in the corridor collectively stared at the silver-haired beauty whose hair was somewhat disheveled. This behavior also attracted her attention. The soul-stirring young lady turned her head. When she saw Gulacy and the others, her eyes flashed with doubt. She lightly opened her mouth as if she was the mistress of this place. Anna. Who are they? Miss AI Lizzie, these are the guests of the Sorofia family. They are the servants of Miss Xia Luot, who is engaged to young master. Anna, who had been well-mannered since they met, seemed to be a little embarrassed in this situation. She hurriedly stepped forward to block Gulacy's line of sight. Then, she forced a smile and explained. This is Miss AI Lizzie of our Akate family. She is the younger sister of Luoya. They usually have a good relationship and often read books together until late at night. Younger sister. Read books until late at night? When Anna said that the girl in front of her was Luoya's younger sister, even Gulacy couldn't help but widen her eyes and exclaim in her heart. Gulacy glanced at AI Lizzie, who hurriedly adjusted her clothes to cover the kiss marks on her body. She felt her brain buzzing. According to the information report provided by Sorofia, Gulacy already knew that this young lady named AI Lizzie was only an adopted daughter. She had no blood relationship with Luoya, but even so, the two of them were still considered to belong to the same family. How could she act so recklessly? An abnormal relationship between a man and a woman within the family was undoubtedly a taboo topic for Gulacy. The servant girl's expression turned ice-cold and the servants of the Akate family quickly tried to mediate the situation. Miss, you must be tired from staying up all night reading, right? Do you want to go back to your room and rest? Yes, Anna. My brother is still sleeping, so I'll go back to my room first. Yes, Mississippi, the silver-haired girl lowered her head and did not look at Gulacy and the others at all. Under the cover of the maids, she hurriedly left with her unbuttoned clothes. Gulacy looked at her back and suddenly found that there was something wrong with her pace. Wait, did they really have sex? This child didn't look very old. How could something like that happen at this age? Gulacy looked at AI Lizzie's awkward walking posture, and his mind was in a mess. Just like any adult who saw a young person messing around, the first thing he felt was disbelief. Maybe it's a problem with her sleeping posture. No matter what, it shouldn't be that absurd, right? The servant girl who was looking for a reason in her heart was a little pale. The good impression she had of the Akate family so far was almost gone. Drawing a few minus signs in the little notebook in his heart, Gulacy took a deep breath and calmed his emotions. Although the Akate family was doing well and had a deep history, the fact that Luoya Akate had a relationship with her adopted sister made her feel that this family was not as upright as she thought. It seems that I have to reevaluate the situation of the Akate family. Gulacy regrouped, and the Akate family also finished cleaning up the mess. AI Lizzie was escorted away by the servants, and Anna led Sorofia and the others to familiarize themselves with the mansion. The rest of the trip went smoothly. The group confirmed the location of the restaurant, the situation of the kitchen, and the day's menu together. After the two sides finalized the various taboos when meeting, Gulacy looked at the guards and frowned. From the beginning, Gulacy felt a little strange. Although the Akate family was a big noble family, there seemed to be some problems with the defense of the Akate family. There were actually two troops with different uniforms in charge. Normally, even if there was a difference in position or strength, the guards should be wearing the same uniform. Otherwise, it was very likely that both sides would be less vigilant against strangers. After all, no one could tell whether the other side had new members or not. For this strange situation, Golesi, who was also in charge of Xia Luo's safety, naturally chose to ask, but he didn't expect to get a shocking answer. This is the army directly under Her Royal Highness? Yes, this was a gift from Her Royal Highness 2 years ago when young master returned to the Akkad family. It represents the deep friendship between both sides. Anna looked at the royal guards with a normal expression. It was obvious that she was used to their existence, but the words she said shocked Golesi to a certain extent. Golesi had long heard that the royal family of the St. Maester Church acted as the protector of the Akkad family according to the ancient contract, but he didn't expect it to be to the extent of directly sending troops. From this point of view, the Akkad family, who had a good relationship with the royal family, seemed to have great potential. Although titles, territories, and the like were impossible to mention, as a big country, the power of the ministers of the St. Maester Church was still considerable. Not to mention other things, the influence of their political participation on the Church's diplomatic relations with the Rose Commerce United Nations was a big variable. Why did Xia Luo's father, Bruce, marry the daughter of a big noble in the Austin Empire? It was because Xia Luo's grandfather had a great influence in the empire. Similarly, if Luoya could also transcend the territory and lead the St. Maester Church to favor the Rose government, then Sorofia's benefits would be great. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.